Mayor, you are recording and streaming live.
Great. Good evening. It is Tuesday, August 25th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. This is the regular meeting of the City of Morro Bay City Council. This meeting is being held via teleconference. I'll ask the clerk to establish a quorum of council members, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Addis. Here. Councilmember Davis.
Present.
Councilmember Heller.
Here.
Councilmember McPherson. Here. And of course, Mayor Hedding.
Present. Thank you. We do have a quorum, and I will call the meeting to order and ask for a moment of silence, please. And thank you. And Madam Clerk, could we have the flag? And we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And with that, I'll ask our city attorney, Chris, do we have any closed session report?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. No closed session items to report.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. With that, we'll move to council members' reports, announcements, and presentations. Let's start with Council Member Davis, please.
Sure. Good evening. At our council meeting 2 weeks ago, Betty Winholz asked a question about the staff and council being rock solid together. And that reminded me that back in March, we all agreed to waive our stipend for the rest of this year. In the middle of July, however, I discovered that a deposit had been made to my bank account. So I contacted Ms. Calloway and made sure that my waiver will continue all the way until the end of the calendar year. And then I wrote a check for the amount that was deposited, and I sent it to the Community Foundation of Estero Bay. It's not much, 2 weeks salary, but it will help the Community Foundation. So to answer Ms. Winholz's question, yes, the council does remain rock solid together with our department heads and our employees. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Council Member Davis. I'll affirm I've done the same and waived my salary through the end of the year. Thank you. Go ahead and move to Council Member Heller, sir.
I have no announcements this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Absolutely, and thank you. Council Member McPherson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I, too, have waived my stipend through the end of my term, through the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Councilmember Addis.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Davis, for that reminder. I thought we had done that as well. So I'll be in touch with Ms. Calloway to get mine back in order. I appreciate that. And then I also wanted to share with folks that thank you to my colleagues for appointing me to the We Are the Care initiative by First Five. We had our first meeting and orientation with council member representatives from across SLO County. We heard about the challenges that communities are facing with early childcare. We also heard about movement that other cities are making, even cities our size, in the area of early childcare. And we shared some ideas, and I'm looking forward to continuing with that group. I think it'll be very powerful to find out more about what Morro Bay needs in terms of early care and what solutions we can find and provide.
Thank you for volunteering for that, and thanks for that report. I reported last meeting about the College Bound Today program. I had the opportunity to meet with Principal Carl at Loams Middle School. They are looking for 15 volunteer mentors needed to launch a pilot college access mentoring program at Los Osos Middle School. The College Bound Today program seeks 15 volunteer mentors to work with 40 eighth grade students at Los Osos Middle School starting in September of 2020. These mentors will meet with students on Saturday mornings once each month during the school year, either via Zoom or in person, depending upon the issues associated with the pandemic, to help guide students in taking the following important steps: exploring their current interests, post-secondary college and career goals, helping students complete the Loams 4-year plan by selecting their high school courses for grades 9 through 12, exploring after-school and summertime extracurricular opportunities, discussing the college application process with these students, conducting mock job interviews, reviewing and discussing students' writing, accompany students on field trips, again, depending upon COVID-19 and the ability to do that, explore career opportunities with students, and anticipate and plan for the transition from middle school to high school. The time commitment, if you'd like to be a mentor for this very important program, is to work with students for at least 2 years, starting in the 8th grade at Loams and continuing through the 9th grade at Morro Bay High School. And mentors would commit to participate in monthly meetings on Saturdays from 9 to 12:30. That's just once a month on Saturday from 9 to 12:30. The first training is scheduled for September 19th from 9 to 12:30. And if you would like further information, you can contact me directly or contact Dan Clement at 310-710-4071 and mention that you are interested in being a mentor for this very important program for college-bound students. Thank you. That ends my announcements, and I'll turn to Mr. Collins, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members and community members. I'm just going to give a brief update on a couple items. The first is that our engine 5392 is up north supporting the CZU Lightning Complex fires near Santa Cruz Mountains, where there's an overwhelmingly large fire that's still burning with minimal containment, but our guys are on the line to help secure that line, and we have one of the best mutual aid systems in the world. And we certainly help benefit parts of the state, but at some point it may be our turn, and we will be supported by mutual aid if we had the unfortunate incident of a large fire in our community or in our county. The RV camping program is nearing readiness to launch. We have 3 areas in the waterfront we're serving as pilot areas for this program, which is paid for through the low-cost accommodation fund, so no general fund involvement at this point. And we anticipate that, seeing a lot of folks doing camping and maybe parking in our streets, which will be addressed later this evening on item C1, I believe, that this may help drive people to paid opportunities, which will help our harbor and general fund. And speaking of visitations, our visitation is up higher than we anticipated when COVID-19 hit, without any marketing by the city or the county for visitors. In fact, sending out opposite messages of that. We still are seeing an influx of visitors, as our community is well aware, primarily because people are choosing coastal or mountain environs for their vacations as opposed to getting on planes and going elsewhere. In addition, people are trying to escape fires and smoke and are coming to the coastline in droves. So you couple that phenomena with takeout or dine-out only options, and we're definitely seeing significant impacts on our restroom and trash service in the waterfront area and other areas. City Council did approve additional resources for trash and restrooms. That's despite also cutting $2 million from the other parts of our general fund budget this year to address COVID impacts. So those added resources are helping, as are the volunteers who are out there. They're unsung heroes heroes in our community who are doing a tremendous job assisting us, and we greatly appreciate that. Despite that, those efforts, increased resources in our volunteers, we're still seeing issues. So we are talking with our trash vendor. We are reaching out to Achievement House and attempting to hire additional staff to continue our efforts to make improvements in this important area. So just wanted to share that with the council and the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, for that update. We appreciate it. And this evening we do have a presentation. I wonder if Mr. Killigrew, are you with us this evening?
I am, Mayor Heading. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Very good to see you once again. This is a presentation by, and I always have to say it, MBCP, soon to be Central Coast Community Energy, but I've always made the mistake of calling it Morro Bay Community Power. It is not. It is currently actually Monterey Bay Community Power, once again, soon to be Central Coast Community Energy. Thank you for being here this evening, and I'll let you take it away with your slideshow.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Heading. And yes, he stole the thunder, but that's okay. We certainly appreciate that Morro Bay has commandeered our name. So it's very much, you are an important piece of this puzzle that we've put together. So let me bring up my slides and give me 1 second. Can everybody see the full screen right now?
Looks good.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much, Mayor Heading and esteemed council members in Morro Bay. Also wanted to just acknowledge City Manager Collins for all his great work, as well as all of your great work to help bring this to fruition in Morro Bay. And we all greatly appreciate sending that truck up north to Santa Cruz. It's been a real challenge for a lot of our customers and our communities. We have people who live and work up in that area, and we really appreciate just the know-how that, you know, our communities down in San Luis Obispo are supporting us. And hopefully if there's ever a time where you folks need help, our communities up north will help you down south as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So we deeply appreciate it. Tonight's presentation is something that we've committed to all of our member agencies across the Central Coast, is that we provide a presentation to each one of you every year, as well as a litany of other great engagement opportunities to support all of our cities and counties across the Central Coast. So I did want to remind everybody, for folks who are tuning in that are familiar with us but may not have a real good sense of who we are. We are a public agency, technically a joint powers authority. So we comprise of 4 counties and 28 cities across the Central Coast. We started with humble roots actually up in Santa Cruz County, where our board chair, Bruce McPherson, actually kind of led the charge to help get together the Tri-County region with San Benito County, Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, and the 16 cities there within to start Monterey Bay Community Power, which we launched service back in 2018. Fast forward today, we've actually now expanded our membership to include 13 more communities. So that, first and foremost, was the city of San Luis Obispo and the city of Morro Bay, who joined us back in 2018. And that actually led an effort for us to work with 11 other communities across the Central Coast to actually request membership. So we now have an incredible tapestry of communities across the Central Coast. And a lot of that has to do with the leadership from not only the city of San Luis Obispo, but the city of Morro Bay, who kind of started that opportunity for us to engage the rest of the communities in San Luis Obispo, as well as Santa Barbara County. We always like to remind folks about our governance structure, because as a public agency, we take the public process extremely importantly. This is the one major difference between us and the investor-owned utility model, which is that, you know, we are an entity that receives all of our revenue from our customer base, but as a public agency, we fully support our public process. And we actually meet 21 times a year. So over the course of a 12-month period, we sometimes are meeting 1, 2, 3 times a month with our various boards. So very quickly, our policy board is of elected officials. So that could be city managers, council members, mayors, county supervisors. Our operations board is of city managers and county administrative officers. members, and then we have a volunteer body of Community Advisory Council members. We right now have 11. We're actually going to bring 4 more on, assuming our policy board approves it. And our board structure is set up such that we have 17 board members on our policy board, 17 on our operations, but 15 on our Community Advisory Council. And that was set up originally to kind of make sure that we could keep our board manageable, such that communities over 50,000 have an individual seat and communities under 50,000 have a shared seat, such that the city of Morro Bay shares a seat with San Luis Obispo and actually now Paso Robles because they had joined us late last year. So as Mayor Heading stole the thunder, which we always appreciate, he does, we are becoming Central Coast Community Energy. So this is going to be my second to last presentation. I'm presenting to Pismo Beach next Tuesday. But after that, coming next Friday, we no longer will be Monterey Bay Community Power. We will become Central Coast Community Energy. And that's very much an acknowledgement to us helping to unify the Central Coast and bringing on such a strong cohort of communities in Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo, that the idea of calling us Monterey Bay Community Power just probably wouldn't hold weight. And it's sort of a nod for us to acknowledge that the Central Coast is that kind of synonymous term when you're talking about from Santa Barbara up to Santa Cruz. So that's really where our board landed on. So we're really excited, again, for Morro Bay and San Luis Obispo to start this charge that actually led us to renaming ourselves to Central Coast Community Energy. It's tough to talk about accomplishments in these challenging times, but I think the message that we just want to convey today is that we really are doing our best to reinvest in the region through lower rates, through investment in programs, through contracts with local vendors, as well as making sure that we are in the strongest financial position possible to hopefully pursue a credit rating, which is happening in the next few months, but also make sure we have the financial reserves to stave off any kind of regulatory or market fluctuations to make sure that we are going to be here for a long time. I did want to highlight COVID-19 and our response because actually the customers, residents and businesses in Morro Bay actually were able to benefit because, as you know, folks were enrolled back in January of this year, but our board took a decisive and immediate action to reduce all of our generation rates by 50% for the months of May and June, which actually allowed for $22 million of financial relief to our customers across our entire service area. So that was really an impactful thing for us to do in order to be responsive to the growing needs, but we wanted to make it uniform across all customers. And again, as a public agency and being having a fiduciary responsibility to our board and our customers, we are going to be bringing the majority of that revenue back with not as much savings as we had before. That goes from 7% to 2%, but we're also going to reduce the amount of money we set aside from programs by about 1%. So those are the two type of actions that we're taking to be able to kind of bring back the majority of the $22 million that we were able to reduce off customer bills for those 2 months. I did want to update folks about our procurement. We are moving quite fast and aggressively to contract for new and also existing renewable resources. So these highlight the 8 contracts that we have actually executed in the last 2 years. And that basically meets about 35% of our annual demand. But we're not stopping there. We know there are current renewable portfolio standard goals, which is why we wanted to just introduce this concept, this pathway that our board has started to really sink their teeth into about what it means for us to move towards a more effective future in terms of reducing emissions and providing affordable and stable rates for our customers. We are shopping around the idea to actually move away from 100% carbon free, but move towards 100% from new renewable energy projects by 2023. So it's not just sourcing from existing, but looking at contracting for new projects to be built, to be fed into the grid to really help reduce emissions at scale. So we're really excited about this effort and certainly happy to answer any questions or send an invite for you all to join us on Friday when we're discussing more with our member agencies. One of the big hallmarks that MBCB has set up from day one is setting aside a portion of our retail sales or our gross revenue for programs, and those are focused on electrification, fuel switching, and resiliency. So here's the suite of programs that we have for fiscal year 2021. I did also want to mention that we have two exciting efforts that we are hoping to expand further, which is one about school bus electrification. So right now we've actually provided 6 school districts in the Monterey Bay region with no-cost electric school buses, and we're hoping to expand that out so that school districts in San Luis Obispo County have that opportunity again within the communities that we serve. But also housing. I know that's a major challenge, but also opportunity across the Central Coast. We actually provide incentives to help developers build all-electric, either multi-unit dwellings, and then now we're shifting to single-family residences. So any developer that's building new housing stock, we want to help them move to all-electric as opposed to gas. I did also want to remind the city of Morro Bay that we do have a great opportunity for you as it relates to financing backup supply for your critical facilities. So our board has actually set aside $20 million in low-cost financial support for the public sector. That could be cities or counties. It could be public hospitals, public schools, or public water or wastewater districts. So this is really looking at what is critical, whether it's City Hall, a library, a community center, you name it. What's the critical load that needs to stay on in light of, if there was a rolling blackout or a public safety power shutoff event? So again, just another creative opportunity for us to share with the public sector. And we're also looking at hopefully setting up a loan guarantee program for the private sector to provide low-cost financing for a similar type service, but for the private sector. I did want to highlight that the city of Morro Bay had a fantastic enrollment overall. I know we did a lot of outreach to your largest businesses, a lot of community groups, and that really shows with the participation rate. So you're over 98% of eligible accounts are currently participating. And we just wanted to highlight that the city is looking to save over $16,000 off of its bill this year compared to PG&E rates, as well as the community at large is going to be saving close to $350,000 off of its collective bills compared to if you had never had our service this year. So really a nice testament to what's to come, what's happening right now, and as we move into the future in terms of delivering, data points to help further validate this enrollment and the value of this agency for your community. I'm going to wrap it up right now with a few key updates. So if folks were not aware, we did open up a satellite office in San Luis Obispo. Right now we have, again, 2 staffers down in San Luis Obispo, but they're remote right now. We're actually hiring 2 more positions down in San Luis Obispo as well. So hopefully in the next month or so, we'll actually have 4 local representatives supporting communications and outreach. As I mentioned, we'll be changing our name effective September 4th of this year. We also have a big enrollment coming up in January of 2021 throughout the year, where Paso Robles will be enrolling, Pismo Beach, Grover Beach, Arroyo Grande, and most of all of Santa Barbara County. So we're really excited to continue to drive value for the Central Coast. And then again, just really taking a pause in terms of what we've done thus far and thinking about being more strategic and thoughtful with our outreach and engagement with the community and making sure we continually get input from our community about how we develop programs moving forward so that we really can invest effectively in the Central Coast based on community needs. So on that note, I conclude my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from this wonderful council in the great city of Morro Bay.
Great, thank you, JR. It's also exciting to hear those numbers, over $16,000 in city service savings, but also $350,000 of savings to our community. And for that, we are very grateful to not only be involved with the organization as part of it, but also very grateful for the return on investment and the ability to leverage non-carbon-based energy sources. So let me open it up to Councilman Heller. Any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember McPherson.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you so much for the presentation. I was on the council when we decided to do this, and I'm grateful for the update. I really appreciate it. So thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank
And
you,
Councilmember Addis, any questions? Or
I
comments?
don't have any questions either, but I'm glad to see the coming changes to the name and that more communities are getting involved and that we're in this together to change our future. So I appreciate that.
And Councilmember Davis, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. And I want to ask, does your residential incentive program include City of Morro Bay?
Yes, it will. So yeah, any customer that's currently enrolled in our service area would be eligible for a program. So should a program be eligible for, the residential sector, then yes, residents in Morro Bay would be eligible. And we're actually looking at launching that program probably next spring or early summer. So that'll be the timeline. And as we get more information, we'll certainly make sure that everybody knows about it. Trust us.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Council Member.
Great. Thank you, council members. And Mr. Collins, any comments, sir?
No, I wasn't expecting to make any comments other than just to say thanks to the whole crew at MBCP, but that's going to be changing soon. And, I'm glad to be part of it. And we know we have a good representation right now with the city of SLO representing our area at this point. And thanks for all the great work.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And JR, thank you once again. Look forward to writing you at www.3cenergy.org soon on September 4th when you become Central Coast Community Energy. Thanks for all you're doing, and thanks for being here this evening, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I wish everybody a safe and healthy evening, and thank you again.
Be safe and be well. Thanks. Okay, with that, we will move to public comment. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order N29-20 issued by Governor Newsom on March 17, 2020, this meeting will be conducted telephonically through Zoom and broadcast live on cable channel 20 and streamlined on the city website. Please be advised that pursuant to the executive order, and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, the Veterans Hall will not be open for the meeting. If you would like to participate in general public comment, our clerk will be displaying how to gain access. There it is on the screen. You can either access this directly through the link noted on the screen through the Zoom webinar, or by calling the phone number on the bottom of the screen, and please push the raise hand button, a reminder, if you would like to speak. So we are on item public comment. This is general public comment by any members of the public that would like to speak for items on the agenda for which you can't stay, or items not on the agenda. And Zeke, do we have public comment, sir?
Yes, we do. But first, we have a caller with the number ending in 990. Caller, go ahead.
Hello? This is Richard Sadowski.
Welcome, Richard.
Good evening. I'm Richard Sadowski. I'm running for Morro Bay City Council this election. And what I'd like to bring up to the attention, I've surveyed several businesses, and we have an urgent need for trash pickup and bathroom cleanliness, especially on the Barcadero. The businesses that I have talked to, the smaller businesses, they can't, staff the people to clean up their local little bathrooms for the public use and have them sanitized due to the COVID thing every use. And as I walked up and down the Barcadero, there's several of the local businesses have been picking up trash and trying to address this issue. And this issue is pretty dire right now because it's a public health and health issue right now. What I'd like to do is just have the city take a little bit more action into enforcement with regards to litter, and spend a little bit more time making sure that our Embarcadero and our areas are clean for the visitors and for the local businesses. Thank you. That's about it.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. Anthony, next caller.
Next caller we have is Chris.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chris Rodebush, and I'm from the We Are the Care Initiative, which I was so happy to hear Councilmember Dawn Addis give a shout out to us today. And I wanted to comment a little bit further about what We Are the Care is up to. So as she mentioned earlier in her comment, we have identified liaisons from each city council and the Board of Supervisors in SLO County. And this group had its first convening this past Thursday, August 20th. We look forward to building our regional partnership and hope that we are able to come together to find solutions to the child care crisis. Now more than ever, we are reminded that access to quality and affordable care is vital for our community to function and support our economy. We can clearly see that child care professionals are now and have always been an essential part of our workforce. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken over most aspects of our life, and it has widened gaps that already exist in access to quality child care and early education for children. Awareness of racial and socioeconomic inequity and privilege has also been brought to the forefront of our society, and these issues also impact childcare. We need to work to address access to quality care for all children, and especially families who are disadvantaged from the start. One way we're hoping to gain perspective and understanding of the existing framework of childcare in San Luis Obispo County is through the collaborative childcare study launched with support from the City of SLO, the County of SLO, San Luis Coastal Unified School District, and Cal Poly. We are happy to announce that we have found a contractor and they began work on August 1st with phase 1 of the study. This feasibility study will develop a suite of recommended options for public sector organizations to pursue that contribute to expanding quality, affordable childcare in the county. Thank you so much for your time. I will be back again soon with more updates. And if you want to learn more about We Are the Care or to get involved, please contact First 5 San Luis Obispo County or find more information on our website, www.first5slo.org. Thanks so much and have a great evening.
Thank you, Chris. Anthony, next caller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next caller is Carol Truesdale.
Welcome, Carol.
Okay, I'm unmuted now, so I think you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Welcome, Carol. Yes.
I feel like a commercial for a phone. Good evening, council members and citizens. First, I want to second what Mr. Sadowski had said about the trash cans, and I also want to applaud Councilman Heller's ability to go pick up trash on behalf of the citizens of Morro Bay. My husband and I donated money towards the trash can fund, and I'm hoping that the city will open up a little bit more and accept some of the donations from the city, because this is really important. And I listened to the TBIT meeting last Thursday, and the hoteliers and moteliers had the same thing, to discuss. That's item number 1. Item number 2 is I wanted to ask about the housing element. I was reviewing the site inventory, north and south, et cetera, and how is the classification of high, low income be designated for a vacant piece of land? Is it that not classifying a certain type of individuals who can live in an area? Isn't that that being prejudiced? So I think that's a message for Mr. Scott Graham to answer a little bit later in the broadcast. I can't stay. I have homework I have to do tonight, but I just want to put it out there. How can we designate a piece of land that is going to be high or low income? Thank you, and that's about it. Everybody stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we have one more caller in, phone number ending in 480. Caller, you're on the line.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Marcel. I'm moved up here recently, and I kind of like to echo what Carol and Richard had said about the trash. That's actually why I'm calling in. I was walking around, and I mean, it's literally everywhere. The porta potties aren't being cleaned. The public restrooms are unsanitary. I mean, I can't imagine it takes more than 5 minutes to pressure wash those. Is there a way you could guys maybe agendize this for your next meeting? Maybe reallocate some resources. You know, this is a tourist economy, and it's not very receptive to tourism. That's all.
Thank you, Marcel. Anthony, any other callers?
Mr. Mayor, I do not see any other callers at this time.
Okay, I will close general public comment and bring it back to council. And Mr. Collins, could you update us on the several folks that commented on the trash issue currently, what the city is doing? I know there was discussion as well at the T-bid this last meeting. I also heard their input, but I'd appreciate your update. Thanks.
Sure. I'll repeat what I just said a few minutes ago and elaborate on that. So we are seeing more tourists than we anticipated coming this summer. That being said, you know, council did approve adding more staff hours and more trash cans and more restroom service compared to previous summers. And we've definitely put those in play, and we've been adjusting with more dumpsters and are launching a Trash Hero program similar to our Mask Hero program, which has been successful in getting more people to wear masks. As it stands right now, the capacity is not meeting the demand. The demand is way up because it's takeout only. And so we are adjusting on the fly, just as our allied agencies to the south in Bismo, those in Cayucas, Santa Cruz and San Diego and Orange County, every city is dealing with this this impact, as well as our mountain communities that are dealing with more tourists than they anticipated. So we are trying to act accordingly. And like I said at the beginning of this meeting, we were talking with Achievement House to see if we can get their services. We're trying to add more staffing and looking at other places to deploy more trash cans and dumpsters. So we know how imperative it is. We know where there are issues and getting to from one side of the embargo to the other because of traffic flow issues. And so police and harbor are working on some traffic pattern design to help move traffic along, especially on Saturdays when we see a lot of visitors in town, which will also allow our public works crews to get to and from when they're, you know, literally moving as fast as they can to empty trash cans. We've doubled the amount of service that we had previous years. We've doubled the contract with Waste Connections, who does the trash hauling on our behalf. And we're just going to keep adding where we can. So this is an ongoing issue that all coastal communities are facing. We're staying on top of it, and we appreciate the observations that are coming in from the community, as well as all those volunteers who are out there helping us in the morning hours where it's particularly bad.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the expanded update on that. Mr. Graham, if you're listening, I'll ask that you make a note on Ms. Truesdale's questions with regarding the housing element and the classification of high-low income and the issue of prejudice. If you would address that when we get to item B1, please. Okay, we will move to item A, consent agenda. I will go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for items on the consent agenda only. Public comment is now open. And Anthony, any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have Betty Winholtz, bringing her up right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're live, Betty.
Thank you. This is Betty Winholtz. I want to.
Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to item A4, which is about applying for a grant. And it's actually for the roundabout at Highway 41 in Maine. And just the way this has been titled and presented is typical of how this project has been handled the last few years. So people do not know what you're talking about. So when you call it the ATP grant, people don't know until they read into the second paragraph what this is really about. And so I want to bring this to people's attention and to yours, that it's not appreciated that this project is being hidden, because I think you know that there is some pushback on it. And I would like to say that one of the arguments within the staff report is that this has been come about because of our bike. There's increased bike use of it, but there's no data to back that up. It's saying that it is to help with the pedestrians, and yet roundabouts are not supposed to be put in where there is a high level of pedestrian use because it's dangerous. There's no input from Caltrans, though you refer to them. We don't see the data from the ICE study. We've never seen a picture of what you're proposing or the studies that back that up. And so, and finally, how it impacts the other projects in the area, particularly the low-income housing one that was just passed a few weeks ago. So my request is that you become more transparent about this project, and that when you present it, that you have some data and backup on what we're talking about here, because we have no idea what you're planning for this area other than that it's a roundabout. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, any other public comment?
I do not see any other raised hands currently, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close public comment for the consent agenda. I'll go ahead and pull A4, and when we get to it, I will ask Mr. Leivik to comment on a number of questions that Ms. Winholtz raised. But I'll take any other pulls for anybody else want to pull any items. Hearing none, I'll take a motion for approval of A1, 2, and 3.
I move we approve items A1, 2, and 3 on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
So motion by Councilmember McPherson to approve items A1, 2, and 3, second by Councilmember Addis. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Member McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll pull A4, and Rob, if you're with us, Rob Leivik.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Could you address item A4 with regard to the titling ATP grant? The quote was, "The project is being hidden." Please let us know if that is the intent or why the title is as such. Maybe address the bike use, no data available issue. The issue with regard to roundabouts, quote unquote, for Ms. Winholtz, no input from Caltrans, no picture of the roundabout, and no information regarding impacts to other projects. Thank you, Mr. Leivik.
Thank you. It has been a while since we presented this, the project itself, to the public. A couple of years, we brought forward to PWAB and to council the intersection control evaluation phase 1 results to PWAB and to council. The project is now in the what is known as the project authorization environmental determination phase. So we're still carrying 2 alternatives with this project, a signalization alternative and a roundabout alternative. Although in Caltrans's view, the roundabout is the superior alternative because it has the longest life. Let me address pedestrian and bicycling safety. A modern roundabout is designed to have fewer conflict points for pedestrians and cyclists. The crossings are set back from the intersections. Approach speeds in a roundabout are lower than at a signal, and they're not 90-degree approaches, so you'll see less T-bone or direct blows in an intersection. There are pedestrian refuges and islands at the crossing points. So based on work done by FHWA and Caltrans, the view is roundabouts are less hazardous than a conventionalized signalized intersection because of the reduced speeds. Regarding Caltrans' review, this is a major capital project for Caltrans. They're highly engaged in the project. Their project management team is engaged with the project along with local assistance. It is a project that has already received both federal, state, and local funding to move it forward. We're just hoping to put together the last pieces of funding so that when we complete the design, we can deliver the construction of the project. The grant is an ATP, Alternative Transportation Plan grant, and roundabouts are one of the types of projects that are fundable through this program. I believe I answered all the questions.
I think you got them all. Rob, thank you for the update on that. Very much appreciated. With that, unless there are any questions, I'll move for approval of item A4.
Second.
You have some questions and comments, if I could, Mayor.
Certainly. So we have a motion by Mayor Heading to approve A4 and a second by Councilmember Davis. Any discussion? And Councilmember Heller.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem.
So this item is something I'd like to talk about for a couple of reasons. And one is I agree with Ms. Winholt's comments about transparency. Not that anything is trying to be hidden per se, but I think those of us who are engineers are involved in city work have a kind of a different language that the average person on the street has, and whether it applies to this item or any item, I really think it would benefit the community members if city manager and the staff members made a greater effort to really describe things in plain language before acronyms come in and so forth. And this is not something against you, Mr. Leivik, or anybody in particular. But I think a lot of these things can be described in a way that people understand them before you get into the engineering acronyms and information that, frankly, is over a lot of people's head. And I think that's what transparency is communicating in a way so that the person you're communicating with understands baseline of what you're communicating. And I think in general, the documents generated by this city have a long ways to go to be transparent so the average person can understand. Secondly, I get what you're saying about the signalization alternative versus a roundabout, but if the roundabout at the entrance to the city at Morro Bay Boulevard is any example, that's an extremely hazardous situation there for pedestrians. I mean, I personally have almost hit people, and I'm a pretty cautious driver. I think a roundabout with no signals whatsoever is a mistake. And I know Caltrans carries a lot of weight, and maybe it's their decision to make. But I really believe that a roundabout is a mistake at this, unless it's a signalized roundabout, which means there are buttons that pedestrians will push that will stop the traffic so they can cross. Remember, this intersection is at Morro Bay High School. It's a heavily traveled intersection, and it's going to become even more heavily traveled over time. We have to do what is absolutely safe for pedestrians and bikes. And I think a non-signalized roundabout is not the right way to go. And please put that on the record, City Clerk. I'm opposed to a roundabout without signals at this intersection. Thank you.
So the item is not to approve a roundabout this evening. It is the grant. And any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to comment. Yeah, I just happened to have been the chair of the Public Works Advisory Board when this item was discussed quite extensively, and it was not only by the PWAB, but also by the City Council at the time. And it is a number of years ago now, probably about 5, as I recall. But there were There was a lot of study done. There was a lot of public input gathered. I know that the high school was involved in reviewing the design and approving it. And so there has been a lot of outreach. It's just unfortunate that it's taken this long to reach the point of implementation. But I do want to provide that historical perspective.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate that. Any other discussion or comments? If not, roll call vote.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis? Councilmember Addis?
Yes. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Councilmember Heller?
No.
And Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Great, thank you. That takes us to item B, public hearing. This evening we do have a public hearing. This is adoption of resolution number 79-20, adopting the housing element update for 2020 through 2028 and adopting the negative declaration. This item will be a public hearing. I'll open with staff report and then council questions. I will then open up the public hearing, asking for public comment on the item. After that, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to council, entertain a motion and or further discussion. So with that, Mr. Graham, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Heading, members of council. Happy to bring forward the 2020-2028 housing element for your review and adoption. Dana, if I could get you to promote Amy Sinsheimer. She's with PlaceWorks and will be providing the presentation this evening on the item. Also, we have Nancy Hubbard on the Zoom call as well. She was city lead on the project, so will be available after the presentation for questions. There we have Amy. Perfect. So I think we have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and I'll turn it over to Amy.
Hi, everybody. 1 second here. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Good evening. Like Scott said, I'm Amy Sinsheimer. I'm here with PlaceWorks and happy to be assisting the city with the housing element update. Just to give a little bit of introduction before we launch into the slides, we have been working on the project since last fall, and we'll get into some of the schedule information. But we are here tonight after speaking with the Planning Commission at a couple of meetings about the draft, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So let's talk about what is the housing element. It may not be familiar to everyone. This is one of the elements in your city's general plan. It is required along with 7 other elements by the state. And this is the only element that goes through a really rigorous compliance process and review process with state staff. So that is the Department of Housing and Community Development. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. As the mayor mentioned, we are on an 8-year time frame for this housing element that will be due at the end of this year. So the goal is to have it adopted by the end of the year. So I'd say you are in pretty good shape. And then it will guide your housing policy and programs or actions through the end of 2028. You currently have an element that was adopted in 2014 that will be in effect until this one is adopted. And this document looks at a lot of things housing related. There's a lot in here, as I'm sure you've all taken a look at. It does have some existing conditions information, census data, and other data that paints the picture of what's going on in Morro Bay compared to last time the housing element was updated, what's going on in the region, and talks about the housing market in general, things that are not within the city's control. And we look at the regulations in the city that govern housing development. we take a look at what the city said would happen in the last housing element and how that is moving forward and what is the goal for this time. So we'll talk a little bit more about the details of that as well. Here is a list of kind of the overall sections. The first two bullets on this list are a little different because they call out some proposed revisions that the Planning Commission brought forward during their meetings. So in the introduction section, which is the very beginning of the housing element, there is some revised language to add a vision statement for the housing element, which was proposed by the Planning Commission, and to modify the text after that in the introduction. You will see other places in the version of the housing element that's in your packet tonight where some proposed revisions have been included, and we're looking forward to your input on that. As I mentioned, there's also what we call the housing needs assessment. This looks at the existing demographic information related to housing in the city. We took a look at what's called the adequate sites inventory. This is a requirement of state law to actually plan for a certain number of housing units by 2028. And there is something called the regional housing needs allocation that is there as well.
The slides don't seem to be moving.
Shoot. Okay, so are we on the first slide?
It's sitting on.
Yes, you are. Right.
Okay, let me stop sharing and share again and see if that makes a difference. Can you see them moving now?
That looks good. Okay,
sorry about that. So let me just back up. This was briefly what I was talking about a minute ago, where we have the 8-year time frame, and this is part of your general plan. Give a second here for folks to review this text. And then moving on, just an overview of what's included in the draft housing element. I was mentioning that there has been a vision statement added as part of the Planning Commission review and input, as well as some revisions both in the introduction and in other places in the document. You can see those in track changes in your agenda packet. We took a look at the existing demographic information, and then also went through the process of analyzing where there are either sites or opportunities for additional housing in the city. And the state does require that this be done in a pretty regimented fashion. And I'll get into this a little bit more on some slides a little bit later. But that is where we take a look at what's called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or the RHNA number for Morro Bay. We take a look at what are the regulations governing housing currently in the city. And so for the most part, that's in your zoning. And so that's your current zoning. And we know that the city is working on an update to the zoning code. So those regulations that are changing for the new zoning code are not what's been analyzed in the housing element. It is required to look at what is currently adopted. But we do know that there are some changes coming, and that is discussed in other parts of the housing element. We looked at where there's opportunities for energy conservation in homes. So what are some local programs? We know you have your community choice power now that we heard about earlier in the evening, and other things that are available or options out there for homeowners to conserve energy. We look at what was called for in the last housing element and how that has been implemented since then, since 2014. And then there is a goals, policies, and implementation actions section, just like in all of your other general plan elements. And that is the action package for the next planning period through 2028, and that will align with what's in your draft general plan. And once the housing element has been adopted and finalized, then there is a section in the draft general plan in section 5 where there's a table of all of the actions, and so the housing element actions will also end up in there. I want to talk a little bit about the community outreach for the project. It has changed from what it was originally envisioned to be because of the pandemic, but we did start out last fall with a community survey, both online and one that could be completed hard copy. And that ran at the end of last year into January. We also had a public workshop at the Vets Hall in December and had a good discussion there about lots of different housing issues. And then that informed our initial drafting of the document. Then we spent several months getting the first draft, which was reviewed by the staff together, and then the draft available for the public to review. That came out in mid-April. So by that time, we were under a lot of limitations for outreach. So the outreach for the public draft did include an e-blast to everyone that's on the Notify Me list, some social media posts. It was posted on the city website in April 14th, so has been available ever since then for public comment. And then we also followed up to let those know who participated earlier in the process that the draft was available. And then this summer, we've had 2 planning commission hearings on the draft just previous to the one that's before you tonight, and received their input and, as I mentioned, some proposed revisions. We have been in touch with the state about requirements for outreach during COVID. It is really important to housing and community development to have a good outreach effort. So we wanted to make sure that, within the limitations, that we were meeting what they are looking for, and they did, confirm that this outreach effort was acceptable, and the document has also already gone through review by the state, and that was completed earlier this summer. So they were satisfied with the level of outreach, but it has been more challenging than it would be under normal times. So we appreciate everyone who has provided their input. I mentioned the Regional Housing Needs Allocation Number, or the RHNA number. So this is something that happens every time the housing elements are due around the state, which happens about every 8 years. It's a staggered schedule for the different areas of the state. And the state puts together projections for the need for housing in the state, and it is quite high at this time, as you all know. So the numbers for this cycle, which is called the 6th cycle of the housing element, have increased around the state. And so the number for Morro Bay this time is 391 units. It was about 150 units for the 5th cycle. And the number for the county as a whole has also increased. So the state provides these numbers on a regional level, and then the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments and the jurisdictions work together to allocate these numbers to all of the cities and the county. And every jurisdiction does need to prepare and adopt a housing element. So everybody else in the county is working on this right now as well. This gets into a little bit more of the details on the numbers that were analyzed to address the RHNA number. So you can see in the second column from the left, that 391 number is broken out into these different income categories. And this is provided in the document that was adopted by SLOCOG, this allocation divided up by the categories. The document doesn't include extremely low income, but that's something that we do in the housing element. And we divide out the very low income number by half to be extremely low income and very low. So basically, starting with extremely low and going up to above moderate income, the extremely low is the lowest income group. That's 30% or below of median income in our county. That's who falls into that category. And then we go up from there. Above moderate income is folks who can generally afford market rate housing, and everyone in the categories above that in the table make less income and generally have a harder time affording housing. What we're looking at here is housing units that have been approved or constructed since the time frame started, where the city can count units towards that 391 number. So what that means is this 391 unit number is a goal for how much housing should be permitted and built by the end of the planning period. The city isn't required to actually build housing units, but they are required to make sure there are enough sites or enough opportunities to accommodate these units. And in the case of Morro Bay, what has been put forward in the draft is to use a combination of actual sites that are zoned to allow residential development and to project out accessory dwelling unit potential. So the state has made a lot of changes in the law the last couple of years to allow accessory dwelling units more broadly, and they do allow jurisdictions to count the anticipated accessory dwelling units towards that RHNA number. So you can see here that we're showing some 207 projected accessory dwelling units and 396 units on vacant sites, vacant lots, and then 45 units on a parcel that has a few small structures on it and is considered likely to redevelop for housing before 2028. The units a little farther over, the 18 units in the third column from the left and the 23 accessory dwelling units next to that, those are units that have already been permitted or constructed, so we can count those towards the city's RHNA. And then finally, all the way at the right, we show that in all of the categories, there are more than enough housing units identified on the sites and with projecting ADUs to address the RHNA. And I do want to note that we'll probably get into this in the question and answer, but just like with the zoning code being in the process of being updated and the general plan, Plain Morro Bay, and local coastal program being in the process of being updated, we could not take into account sites or areas that are proposed to be designated for housing in those documents that aren't currently allowing housing. So that is something to keep in mind when looking at where we're proposing to address these numbers. And so once you have updated those documents, then there will be additional areas to consider for housing development if they are adopted the way that they are currently drafted. I wanted to talk a little bit about the goals that are in the implementation section of the housing element. There's a lot in that section, so we're just highlighting the goals, and we're happy to talk about the policies and implementation actions after the presentation. So there are 6 goals, and I'm just going to read off the titles and let you read the slides. The first one is related to housing supply. The second one is related to protecting and conserving your existing housing stock. So trying to make sure that we're not losing a lot of housing in the city. The third goal is to address the needs of certain groups, and this is something that's identified by the state, and we have information and analysis about what are called special needs groups. This includes those who are unique in a way that may often have them having a harder time finding housing. So this can be folks with disabilities, those who are homeless, single parent households, the elderly, other folks who have limited incomes. And so that's what this goal is about. The fourth goal focuses on homelessness and addressing the needs of folks in that category. Goal H5 is aimed to reduce housing costs so more people overall can afford housing in Morro Bay. And the policies and actions under Goal H6 address equal opportunity and fair housing for all. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the funding sources that the city has either already pursued or is in the process of pursuing that are related to housing and implementing the housing element. The first one is the SB2 planning grant, which the city was already awarded, and that is expected to address a variety of things, including looking at by right development for residential, and so where that makes sense in the city and that would facilitate higher density housing for those with lower incomes and reduce the review requirements and process to make that more feasible for those who propose that type of project. Also, the city is looking at updating their development standards and also focusing in certain areas to have objective design and development standards. This is partly in response to state law in the last couple of years that requires this for certain projects, and also to make sure that there are some areas that are ready to look at for developers for mixed income developments and cluster developments and other things that come out of this process. So not everything that's in the grant work plan is, the outcomes are not completely known in terms of how the city and the community will end up in terms of what is called for in the grant. So I think that second bullet is somewhat in that category. The process will dictate the outcome. The third bullet is to update the city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance and also to develop prototype plans for ADUs, and that will be to make sure that the ordinance is up to date in terms of state law and also any other unique regulations that make sense for Morro Bay. And the other idea is to provide plans so that someone who wants to develop an ADU, if they want to, could use a plan that's already been developed by the city and not spend as much money on design costs. And finally, the city will update their density bonus ordinance, and that is also in the zoning. This is another thing that is updated almost every year in state law, so local jurisdictions are required to keep it updated. And the city will also consider whether there are any unique regulations that Morro Bay wants to include that are above and beyond what's required by state law. The city has submitted a statement of interest for what's called the REAP grant, and this is another state grant for housing. And so that should be happening relatively soon, and included under this statement of interest is to develop a plan for a safe place for homeless folks, especially those who are become homeless very unexpectedly. I'm sure it's always somewhat of a shock, but perhaps because of the pandemic or something like that. Also to update the inclusionary housing ordinance and look at how it's applied and also the fee structure. And finally, to implement an online permit tracking software system. I want to touch on next steps in the process. So it is in front of the council tonight to decide whether to adopt the housing element. And if it is adopted tonight, it would be revised as needed if there are revisions that are approved, and then submitted to the state for what's called their final certification review. And that is a 90-day timeframe that they are allowed to take to review the housing element one more time and then decide whether it can be certified. After the first review by the state, they did issue a letter that said if the element was substantially the same as it was in terms of the revisions that were agreed upon with the city staff, then they would certify it. There are a certain level of revisions that can be made that won't cause additional comments by HCD, but any revisions have the potential to have them comment further. That can happen during that 90-day certification review. And so if the element is adopted tonight, then if there is a need, if the state sees a need to work with the city further to address anything that has happened between the last time they saw it and the adopted version, then that can take place during that 90 days. If the council decides not to adopt the element tonight, then it could be resubmitted to HCD for a second 60-day review of the draft. That is definitely up to the city council. If that was the case, then that would require an additional 60-day period before adoption could occur and the rest of the schedule continue. Whichever option happens, the due date to the state for submitting an adopted housing element is by December 31st of this year. So that's the goal, is to have it adopted and submitted for certification by then. And if that doesn't happen, then the city would be out of compliance until that occurs. So I'm happy to take questions about any of what I've talked about, but in particular, those schedule choices as well. And I think that does it for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Very comprehensive. Appreciate the review. And we will move to council questions now. Perhaps I could start. I just have maybe a couple of high-level questions. And by the way, a very comprehensive document that contains a significant amount of useful information. Highly recommend that as many community members as possible review this in detail to get an understanding of who we are as a community. I was particularly interested on the staff report, page 78, the housing element vision. And I'm just going to read it and then ask you the question. It says, Morro Bay, a diverse, multi-generational community where jobs, sustainable living wages, and affordable housing options serve as a foundation for people of all ages, abilities, and income levels to thrive. I think that is fantastic. And my question is, with the implementation of this plan, is this vision achievable?
Scott, did you want me to take that one?
Well, I think, the statement was revised by the Planning Commission. It's consistent with the introduction in the city's general plan. They did similar language in that document, so this sort of ties the two together. Does sort of restate some of the things that were there, and the intent behind, this is sort of inspirational for a future of what Morro Bay is supposed to look like. And this is an element of the overall general plan, remember? And so it does tie back to that document. And that was the intent behind doing this. I don't know if Amy has anything to add to that, but that was sort of my take.
No, I think that was good.
Okay, thanks for that. At the staff level and or at the Planning Commission level, was there discussion at all about the desire for Morro Bay to either become a community or a destination? And what are the impacts on housing of both of those?
I would just say that I think that discussion has happened more on other parts of the general plan, or Plan Morro Bay. The thing that I think has come up the most as part of the housing element discussion is the vacant or second homes issue. And the Planning Commission did discuss that quite a bit. It's a tough issue. We didn't come up with a lot of solutions to addressing that in the housing element, aside from just allowing for more housing to be developed.
And thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. That, to me, is a danger or a threat to the mission statement that really describes a community, in my opinion, but that's not a question. I reviewed the community input and the letter from SLOCOG. Could you address your response to the only concern in their letter of May 14th, 2020, where they indicate that one of the only concerns FLOCOG has after reviewing the update is an aspect of the adequate sites inventory. The adequate sites inventory only lists one site available for low-income category with a realistic density of 215 units. I wondered if we did respond to FLOCOG, or if not, what the response to that concern or question was.
There is more than one site in that category, so that's not completely correct, but it is correct that there aren't a lot of sites. Again, I'll mention that the city's documents are getting close to being updated, and there are other sites, I believe, that would belong in that category if Plainmore Bay was complete. So because it will be completed within the planning period, that will possibly add to your housing sites inventory, because that is something that needs to be monitored throughout the planning period. The other thing is that there is a law called the No Net Loss Law at the state level that requires that every site that is included in the inventory does need to be monitored, and if it isn't developed in the way that it's shown in the housing element, the city does need to identify other sites to replace that, or another way to address that part of the RENA. And so that's another reason to have a more limited list so that other sites could be added to the list if the sites develop in a way that's not what's in the housing element. And Scott, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, that was the tack that we took. There are certainly some unintended consequences of dealing with, laws passed by the state. And Amy did a good job of explaining what that is. A no net loss one makes you do interesting things with your inventory. You put everything in the inventory, then you're required to do all of the things in the inventory. But if something doesn't develop just as you are predicting there, then you have to find those units someplace else. And so it sort of encourages you to hold some in reserve so that you can do that, and accommodate future development depending on what the development might be, because we don't know what's going to drive the market necessarily. So that's part of the answer to that question.
Thank you. And then I also reviewed the housing element review narrative that was produced by the Chamber of Commerce Governmental Affairs Committee, a very comprehensive document that not only outlined a number of areas of concern with regard to the plan, but also was somewhat prescriptive in making recommendations that potentially could fit into the plan that you have outlined in the document. And so my question is, with that, I'm not going to go into detail and ask a bunch of questions about their inputs because it's so comprehensive, but could you outline for us, Amy, with regard to PlaceWorks and or staff, how you interacted with the business community, or more specifically the chamber, and how you vetted these issues and concerns, and just interested in hearing your perspective. Thanks.
The interaction that I was involved with included the public workshop. The chamber attended that meeting in December, and I believe there were several other representatives of the business community there. I can't remember who they represented. And then they would have also received the follow-up that the draft was available, and we've received input since then, from including that very long letter, and then other shorter correspondence from various members of the business community. And then I don't know if staff has had any other interaction.
I've had a couple of different meetings with the Government Affairs Committee where we went over a housing element, where we were at in the process. They released their letter from the GAC, after we had released the draft housing element. We went through some of the items that are contained in there are items that I think Amy mentioned as part of the SB2 funding that we're going after, and that was, streamlined permitting processes, the residential by rights, the objective design development standards were items that they had pointed out, giving a more concrete development process, shortening turnaround times, things like that. We are looking to do that in both our current grant that we received on SB2, and then the future grant that we have that we're going to be applying for as it relates to REAP funding to add to our online permitting system. We are in the process of turning that public facing as well, but to allow us to do plan checks electronically was what we were looking for as it relates to the the grant application that we'll submit for that. So some of the things that they did put in there, we are are in implementation items that we are working on. Others are not, so we did bring those things forward to the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission didn't direct that we do anything other than bring forward the document that you see before you today.
Great, thanks both Scott and Amy for that. I appreciate it very much. My last question is, there was one particularly, two communities mentioned that at least the chamber in their report felt had transitioned their planning departments and were realistically seemingly going to be able to meet goals in a rapid fashion. We talked about Paso Robles and San Luis Obispo. Are you familiar with any major changes that have occurred in those two cities with regard to the housing element or processes that might be innovative or helpful for us to look at?
Aside from the fact that San Luis Obispo has a housing authority, which I know is engaged in Morro Bay and other places around the county as well, I think that's an advantage that they have. I think the other advantage that both of those places have is land compared to Morro Bay. But I don't know if there's anything else in particular that they were referring to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Our biggest constraint is available land. We're 90+% built out. Those communities are not. Were the city, to expand its boundaries or annex property, it would be easier for the city, like it is in Paso or like it is in San Luis, to develop property. Those are sort of bigger discussions that are probably would have to take place outside of the housing element at this point. I think both of those communities are actually behind us in the housing element adoption process. So I'm not exactly sure, what they're doing on that standpoint. Again, I think both those communities are behind us.
Okay, good. That's fair enough. And just one easy question, maybe, for those in TV land or in the community that don't know what the term by right means, would you just mind educating us all on what by right is?
It probably means something a little bit different for Morro Bay than it does for other communities, but the idea would be that you write into your zoning code, you can have up to, on a certain size lot, up to a certain number of residential units. And they would be able to come in without necessarily getting a discretionary permit, like going to Planning Commission. Right now you can do 4. And you can get through a staff level process, but maybe we could have it up to 10 or 15, and you would do by right. So it would tell you could have that many permitted, and they could go directly to building in some communities. Here, we have a local coastal program that requires coastal development permit issuance, so that would have to be at staff level. But if it met those requirements, we would be able to issue them quickly. The idea would also be that it goes kind of hand in hand with those grant deliverables, and that would be that you have, sort of objective design guidelines that go along with it, so you know what it's supposed to look like. So you're more comfortable approving, up to 10 units, say, as an example, by right, without having to go through a discretionary review process to your Planning Commission. So that's the concept behind it. In some jurisdictions, you'd be able to go directly to Planning Commission or directly to the building department. Here, you won't be able to do that because of the local coastal program, but you would be able to make it a staff level review, so much shorter.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. That was a foreign term in the beginning for me. I learned it, but also felt others needed to hear it. Thanks again for your presentation. I'll turn it over to Councilmember Heller, sir. Questions?
Thank you very much. Amy and Scott, thank you very much for all your work on this. It's an amazing document. I don't know how long you've been working on it, but it's an amazing work. I want to thank all the residents of Morro Bay who have comments, and the Planning Commission who've gotten involved and read through this and have commented as well. And I have a few questions here. I am not a planner, so I've had to read this about 5 times, and I still have a lot of questions. As I understand it, this is a planning document required by the state of California that all agencies have to do a certain timeline. We're trying to get this planning document approved so that we don't have to do it again for 8 years, to put it bluntly. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I didn't touch on that in the presentation, but if it isn't adopted by, it's actually 120 days after the end of the year, then the city would receive a penalty from the state and have to do another housing element in 4 years, and then another one 4 years after that.
Okay, and then per the staff report, it says, all we have to do here is, as part of this element, is provide opportunities and incentives to encourage, not constrain, the development of new housing, especially for low income and special needs population. In a nutshell, isn't that what this element is supposed to be all about?
That's what the state is requiring, and then it is also, it's your community's vision and guiding document relating to housing, so it can go beyond that. Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of, there are a number of implementations listed here. Do we have to do all of them, 70% of them, 20%, or does it not get looked at for another 8 years? What's the process 8 years from now?
I have worked in very few places where all of them were achieved within the planning period. To be honest, it's a lot, but I think most places I've worked, there's been effort put towards all of them, and there are timeframes included in there, so it can be, determined kind of which ones are supposed to be finished sooner, and there are some that are in response to state law. So when that's the case, and when state law asks for something to happen within a certain time frame, that's taken into account there.
Okay, so does Coastal Commission involved in this? Do they have to review it as well, or is it just the state housing?
It is a general plan amendment, so it does go to the Coastal Commission. I don't know how much they provide input on it. I haven't been involved with that part of the process.
Which is the biggest issue.
What's that, Scott? I didn't hear you.
It doesn't require certification by the Coastal Commission.
Okay, but it is part of the general plan.
One state agency, not two.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. That's good news. Now I see you have some grants here to fund this work here, and the first one is the planning grant for $160,000, and there are 4 things listed here that the funding is supposed to support. The residential by right we've talked about. Is that in place, or is that something that still needs work in order for it to be implemented?
We have an outline right now for an RFP to go out to start working on that. A little bit of a pause right now because we partnered up with the cities of Arroyo Grande, Grover Beach, and Atascadero to do one of the pieces here through a separate grant funding opportunity. That's the regional REAP funding. Application was submitted a week or so ago to do the ADU prototype items that, again, is one of the items in the $160,000 grant, but there's another grant opportunity where we can partner with other agencies regionally to do that. And there's 3 other agencies that wanted to partner up to do that. And so we can save that money, revise our grant to do one of the other implementation items, it's in the general plan. So we're kind of holding off sending out that because we don't want to tell somebody we want them to go do that if we're going to get grant funding from another source.
Okay. So, and then the objective design and development standards, are those in place, or do those still have to be developed?
Those will have to be developed.
Okay. And then it talks about the updated zoning code. And then in different parts of this document, it talks about Plan Morro Bay. It talks about zoning updates. There seem to be different dates attached to those different documents and activities. Can you tell me what, one document said it's going to be updated by December of this year, and then another place I see zoning update in 2023. Can you sort that out for me?
We are in the process of updating the general plan, local coastal program, and zoning code. We have we're very close to having adoption drafts for all of those documents. Right now, we just completed review and sent back to the environmental consultant, the EIR. We expect to have a couple of maybe a week's worth of back and forth before we're ready to release that document to send it to the clearinghouse. At which point we'll be finalizing the adoption draft for the general plan local coastal program and taking that for review through the Planning Commission. I would anticipate several meetings there, and then it will be coming forward with the EIR to council. Following behind that probably would be the zoning code, and we'd be picking up, changes in response to items in the final draft of the general plan. So those items are teed up and sort of ready to go. We're kind of finalizing the processes on all fronts right now. We had a more immediate timeline for housing element, which is why we're here. We had to kind of switch gears a little bit, pivot, and start getting that moving forward because we had to have it finished by the end of the year.
Okay. Then you've applied for some other grants here as well, the LEAP grant and the REAP grant, and so no money on that yet. What do you think, any idea, what the cost to the city is of developing this element? I mean, it's a substantial requirement that comes to us from Sacramento. They give us no money to actually build anything, but they say, you've got to generate this housing element that covers X, Y, and Z and backwards and forwards. I mean, what do you think this is costing the city? Is the grant money going to cover what percentage of the whole total cost will the grants cover if we get them all?
Well, I mean, I don't have a total number of what it's going to cost to implement every item in the implementation section. I will say this, though. We are applying, like you indicated, LEAP funding. That'll backfill the money that we spent to have the housing element produced. And then we would be able to save that housing in lieu money and reallocate that potentially towards other implementation items that are in the document. So that would be, a good thing. And then the other, idea behind having an implementation section, not only in the housing element, but also in the general plan itself, is so it's the thing that the council goes to set what the goals are going to be for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. It's what you pull from. These are the guiding documents for what we do in the city. And that would be what council would look at and tell us. You would pull things from those and say, yes, we want you to go do this one and this one. And a lot of those things are predicated on availability of funding. And they also help us to go out and get grants. If we have programs and policies in our documents that are consistent with grants that are released through the state or federal governments, then we can go after those grants because we have documents that actually say that we're going to do those things. So it's a mix, and certainly for the city to have funds available, through the general fund, we could put money towards them there. But again, certainly in the near term, that's unlikely. So most of these things are grant funded or by staff.
Okay. The adequate site inventory. There was a question from the public, and I was wondering about this as well. The income categories vary from moderate to extremely low, assigned to the different sites. How are those established?
Yeah, so first of all, that is a new requirement since the last housing element to actually assign categories to each site. So that is required under the state law. And it is mostly based on the density that's allowed on the site. So the site that is counted towards the extremely low, very low, or low income category has to allow at least 20 units to the acre. And then the moderate category is a little bit less dense zones. And then the above moderate or the lower density sites would be kind of the lowest density zones in the city. To respond to the comment, that is required by the state to allocate and to assign that to the sites in that way. But it is really not required that they all get built in that way. And that's why we have, additional units above and beyond the RENA number in each category so that there is some flexibility there. And that's not the intent to kind of isolate different groups in different sites of the city. So we are responsive to state law.
It correlates with density, though, in general, right?
Yes.
Specifically, the 3300 Panorama Drive project, which is currently zoned R1 PD, medium density, possibly 45 units for moderate income. At what point in this planning process, if we think this is either too dense or not dense enough, at what point can the community comment on how this property is zoned?
Well, I think that's something that has come from the Plan Morro Bay process. So I'll let Scott comment on that as well. But
I'd also say that state law has changed recently, and you can't downzone the property. So it's going to stay with the land use density that it has now. What the community can weigh in on, I mean, that's the state. It has nothing to do with the city. We have no choice. But what the city can weigh in on is what that development looks like. The discretionary process that would bring, housing units to that location would be a public hearing process that the community can weigh in on.
Okay, so it can't be downzoned by state law?
Correct.
I guess the reason I'm asking is I'm not sure how that impacts on that if it gets developed and as big as it is, how that's going to impact the adjacent community, but there are a lot of concerned members there. So the property at 3060 Main Street, which is the big one with 215 units, off the top of your head, and you don't have to commit to this, but of the 215 units, what would be your expectation for the number of extremely low, very low, and low income units, roughly? I mean, is there any way to guesstimate that at this point?
There would have to be a project proposed for that site. I don't believe there is. The staff can respond as well.
Yeah, there's not currently. That site has a couple of issues with it right now. It doesn't have clearance for development through County Environmental Health, and it's owned by Chevron. They've had it listed. McCarty Davis Real Estate's had it listed for a while. I spoke with Steve Davis about 3 weeks ago on it to get status update, and they still haven't gotten clearance. I'm not sure that Chevron's even actively working on it. As far as the number of units that you could get out of there, we have the inclusionary requirement that would have 20 units, of it minimally be affordable. And the city would have, through a discretionary process, some say as to what those income categories would be for those units. Certainly developers could, if they wanted to add some to it, could receive density bonuses to add additional units to that location. It sort of depends on what the project is that gets brought forward.
So it could be anywhere from 10 to, could it be 20% of the units would be available to moderate, to very low and extremely low and low income? Or
currently our requirement is 10%. So if you had 200 units there, then 20 of them would be affordable. And then the city could, weigh in through the discretionary process as to what income levels those would serve. And we would base those on what we show in our housing element.
Gotcha. Okay. And if we were to allow a higher density there above the 215 for various, bonuses, then there would be possibly more affordable units that come out of it, right?
Yeah, we've had conversations with, people are very interested in that site. We get inquiries all the time, especially since there's a real estate sign up on it. And some of those projects have been, partial affordable housing projects. Others have been, market rate housing, multifamily, that would just have the, at least 20 units of affordable housing in them.
Okay.
Units allowed.
And if that property were to be developed, who would pay for the widening of Main Street, or would Main Street be left as a 2-lane road? How does that work?
Well, there are traffic impact fees that the different areas in town pay into. Sort of like buying into the existing infrastructure the city has to pay for it. But no, there's no widening requirement for Main Street.
Okay. Let's see here. So when we talk about constraints, I think it's well known that the main constraint is land, as I understand it. Is there any reason the city owns land? They're not shown on this document, but is there any reason the city couldn't build their own affordable units on the land that the city owns now and hold it long term and rent it at reasonable prices and with preference given to Morro Bay workers?
The city could do any of those. It could do any or all of those things, yes.
Wow, that's the right answer. Let's see here. The specific implementation actions, I do not want to derail this thing. I want it to get approved. But if I have some questions or comments about little word changes in this implementation actions, is it appropriate to talk about them now or later? Or, you've had so much input. I'm very reluctant to make any changes, but there are a few things that I would like to discuss if possible when it comes time for comment. Maybe we should wait till then.
Yeah,
so the other.
That would be the time is during the deliberation process would be to bring those forward and to garner consent from at least two other of your council brethren.
Okay, yeah, well, I will then give up the microphone here and let the other council members ask their questions. Thank you both.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Let's go to Councilmember McPherson. Do you have questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the presentation and for a complete report that, like Mr. Hiller, I had to read several times just to make sure that I understood it all. And I did submit actually 23 questions, and I received a response. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't have to ask all 23 of them here, but I am going to ask a couple. The first one actually follows up on what Councilmember Heller just said, and that concerns how many changes we might be able to make to this document. If we say we're going to approve it tonight, do we have to approve it exactly as it is written, or can we make some general comments about changes that we would like to see and then have it come back? What does that look like? I'm not talking about major changes, but I am talking about making some changes to the current document. How do we do that in a reasonable way so that we can keep it moving?
So council can, provide direction for us to make amendments to the document and request that we draft up those amendments and bring them back at the next council meeting or the following one after that, whatever. And we can do that. You can simply give us the direction and adopt the document and tell us to make it happen. We can do that. I would give one caveat, and I'm going to have Amy weigh in here. She gave some explanation previously about HCD, and there are certain things that they're very connected to in here. So if we're making changes to those sections, then there's the potential that HCD wants to go through a separate review process, the 60-day review process versus the 90-day we're going to approve it process, I think. But I'll let Amy maybe describe that a little better than I just did.
Yeah, so if you do recommend additional changes beyond what's been recommended by the Planning Commission, and if we think that some of those would be of concern to HCD, in other words, something that they care a lot about, like the sites analysis, for example, if we changed anything about the sites, then that would be something they would probably comment on again. And that could happen during their 90-day review if you adopted the document. So it's really about your level of comfort with adopting it or not before HCD looks at it again, I guess. And it's kind of a tricky thing, but it's hard for me to respond at this point in the meeting without seeing what kind of changes are proposed. But as of right now, we think that the changes that have been proposed so far by the Planning Commission, we would feel very comfortable submitting for the certification review after adoption and seeing what HCD says. We don't think that any of those will cause any kind of major re-review.
So in discussion, when we talk about the changes that we might like to see, you can evaluate them and determine whether or not you think HCD would just let you do them. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Then I wanted you to address this issue of the current state policy regarding ADUs, and especially since we have this issue of short-term vacation rentals at the same time. And it was my understanding, and I think I heard Mr. Graham tell us this in an ad hoc short-term vacation rental ad hoc meeting, that current policy, and maybe you can just say what it is, but ADUs may not be used as short-term vacation rentals. Is that correct?
That is my read on it. That came out of the 2019 housing package, AB 68, I think.
Okay, so assuming that we have some short-term ADUs that are currently being used as short-term vacation rentals, are they grandfathered in under this law, or would we be able to terminate the license?
They are grandfathered in. Certainly, were the city wanting to reach into that, the ordinance for short-term rentals could and does address that currently, the draft, and they could, term out after a certain amount of time or immediately upon adoption of the ordinance, depending on how it reads when it gets adopted by council.
Okay, but it is clear that we intend those for long-term rentals.
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that we are taking a regional approach to housing. And I'm just wondering if you've had discussions with any of the nearby communities as to maybe sharing, because we have so limited amount of land available. Is it possible to work with other communities to try to collaboratively reach some of these goals? Or do we actually have to come up with the 391 here in Morro Bay?
We have to come up with the 391 here in Morro Bay. We have, worked regionally. We meet regularly on this. Amy's on these calls as well. The idea is looking at, infrastructure, limitations throughout the county to where we might better locate some of these types of projects, especially affordable housing projects. And we're due to come out with a finalized plan that looks at the regional infrastructure issue. But as it stands right now, the city's on the hook for the 391.
Right, but actually in the very income categories that we have delineated there?
Yes.
Meaning, yes, okay, all right.
That's the way it's divided up between the income categories was not decided on by the city. That was decided on by the SLOCOG and the jurisdictions working together.
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we don't produce that many low income, but the countywide we do, is that going to satisfy the state or not?
No. It's by jurisdiction. So far in housing element world, we haven't gone through a full housing element cycle where the state is actually holding jurisdictions accountable for all of those numbers. So we can't really predict how that's going to go, but we think that that's going to happen more as we move into the future.
If I could jump in, Councilmember McPherson, the RENA allocations that the city gets, along with the ones that the other cities in SLO County gets, that is typically done with a countywide number, and then it's split up. So the splitting up was already done. So it's not like we can ask a neighboring jurisdiction to build housing to accommodate for the numbers we got, because there's a regional number that RENA provides, and then the Council of Governments, and my understanding is the one that Morro Bay belongs to consists of all the cities in SLO County. Then the Council of Governments says, okay, 7 cities, let's split them up. And, they split them up. So that process was already done, if you will, for, who gets what, if that helps.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what a regional approach means, unless it means some kind of accommodation of sharing and understanding the differences between the cities with respect to meeting these goals. But I think you've answered the question. Thank you.
For example, would be what Scott mentioned earlier, how Morro Bay and several other jurisdictions are applying for funding together. And I think that hasn't happened as much in the past, at least related to housing funding. So that's part of the regional ideas as well.
Thank you. So one of our goals is to preserve and conserve existing housing. How does this relate, or relate to this notion that I see happening so much in Morro Bay, which is that people come in, buy a small house, tear it down, and build a McMansion? Is there any way that we can use some of these policies to actually discourage that or prevent that from happening? Or is there anything we can do in that regard?
think the inclusionary, I seem to be fading in. Maybe I'm not actually here. I'm very virtual. The inclusionary housing ordinance has a target, or in the implementation section, it talks about including larger single family homes in the fee for other opportunities for affordable housing. So that is one possibility where it would increase fees related to larger homes that wouldn't be applicable to smaller homes. But other than that, I don't think that we have any policies that would restrict the size of the home.
Okay. And I'm going to follow up with a question that I think the mayor asked, and I didn't quite hear the answer. And that is, given the goals that we have, do we think that these implementation actions that we have included in here are going to achieve the goals? Are they achievable, in other words?
We think they are. We reviewed them, developed them through community outreach and through conversations with the Planning Commission. And yeah, we think they're achievable.
Okay. The implementation actions?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that aside from putting dates in, there really is no sense of priorities. Is that something that would happen in the goal setting process, essentially?
That's normally, how we would envision these. Again, we talked previously a couple of different times tonight about it. The kind of master table that sits at the end of the draft general plan, and it has implementation items for all elements of the general plan. Those will get plugged into that. And there's more prioritization in that table than there is in the individual elements here. So it could be as part of that process as well. But normally, the council would prioritize the things they want staff working on, and we would bring a list of things forward to you, say, here are some options, and certainly that's always going to be there, at least for the near term. The idea is that the general plan at least will be around for another 20 years plus, and then at least 8 more years for the housing element. So.
Yeah, and I guess I'm also then wondering how we monitor progress and how we track to make sure that all of these actions are taken. How does that happen with the council?
Well, how it happens with the council is that the city is required to report to HCD on its progress related to the housing element. And not only originally you used to have to report on the number of housing units you produce, but now you have to fill out the report and speak to all of the policies that you've developed and implementation items, and give a status update on all of those now too. So that's on the city's website now, and that is certainly a report the city staff could bring to council. Otherwise, it's a link that's on our housing website.
Okay,
so and that happens once a year.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
And I think also the funding sources also have a timeline for expending the funding. So I think that will drive the prioritization for some of the implementation actions, so that we can make sure that we meet the funding sunset deadlines.
Okay, and then it really is up to the council to ask you to come to us and give us a report, I guess.
Yeah, those report. I would be putting it into a report format and presenting it like we're doing this evening. Other than that, the reporting document is pretty comprehensive. It has all of our policies in there, and we have to tell what we're doing and how we've done on each one of them. So it's something, if you haven't looked at one before. They changed it a couple of years ago, and it's not a small, simple thing to fill out. It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay. And I think my last question has to do with the homelessness projects that you have included. And, I have also been working on similar projects. And so I'm hopeful that we're able to incorporate some of what's already going on into this document, so that we're not your department isn't going off and looking for a location for a homeless shelter in Morro Bay, while I am as well, and also tracking down funding sources for it. So I do want to make sure that happens in this document, that we are coordinated in this effort. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McPherson. I'll go to Councilmember Addis. Any questions?
I do have a couple. I'm having computer issues. First of all, thank you so much for your extensive work on this and all of the public outreach. Very much appreciated. One of the questions I had has to do with slight changes, and we received a comment via email from someone who was asking about changing one sentence just slightly to be more pinpointed, I think. And it was, she referred to page 3, or excuse me, to section 3-134, page 211. And the sentence was to change from encourage programs for rental and for sale housing to very low income populations to exceed inclusionary standards. To change that sentence to encourage mixed density housing developments that provide units for a variety of income levels, thus avoiding siloing people in areas of the city by income. And I kind of had the same question as my colleagues, like what would it take to make that slight change, and would it derail this this whole thing should, you know, the majority of council want that change?
I need to jump over to that actual language.
This is Ms. Brinkman's submitted public comment, Carolyn Brinkman. Mm-hmm. If you have that in your, I'm just trying to help Amy out to find that.
No, I know.
Yeah, I'm just looking in the document also.
Email.
Thanks, Dawn.
Pretty recently. She says it's page 3-134 of the HE and page 211 of the agenda packet.
I can go open up her letter as well, but do we know which implementation action it is? That would be.
It says
faster.
policy H1.4 density mixed use income planned unit developments.
Okay, so it's a policy.
And I guess my biggest question is, you know, to change something like this, is it a big, lengthy process? I tend to lean toward the language that she's suggesting, but you know, I certainly wouldn't want to derail the process of getting this approved. And so what kind of, you know what I'm saying?
I think that would probably be okay at the policy level. I think the intent of this, and I'll let Nancy and Scott weigh in as well, because I think they had a pretty big role in drafting some of this. But I think it was definitely to focus on the types of units that are subject to the inclusionary ordinance. So if it's going to be brought in to address all income levels, that, you know, we might need to rethink how the inclusionary ordinance is referred to here. Does that make sense?
So I'm not clear what the suggestion was, because this doesn't silo any income group into one site. This is intended to talk about mixed use, mixed types of homes, a large variety, which would be like a micro community within the bigger Morro Bay community, which is also mixed income and mixed needs and mixed housing types.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the suggestion actually improves it, because it's already calling for mixed use developments, mixed income.
I certainly don't want to speak for Ms. Brinkman, and I know I have no idea if, you know, anyway, I don't want to speak for her. I guess what stood out to me is that sometimes we tend to put certain housing sort of all in one place. That's what seemed to be the intent of the change to me. But if you feel like it's not going to add anything, that's plenty of answer to me. And then the other question I had was about the implementation actions for homeless housing and services. And if you could just talk about those a little bit for folks that may not have had time to read the housing element itself.
So we have one implementation action that calls for regional cooperation and to implement the regional plan to end homelessness that's already in place. And then there was one added in response to Planning Commission comments to work on an overnight parking program or a similar program. And I think some of the work plan that the city has submitted for a grant corresponds to this one.
Do we see that coming anytime soon? I know I certainly got a lot of questions about services and supports, and just fielded a question this week about somebody whose family member had become homeless and wondering what Morro Bay could provide for them. Do we see any of those services coming?
I mean, this is one of the implementation items, and again, one of our grant applications will include items related to this, related to the parking issue anyway, for overnight parking. So that's one of the things we intend to work on, assuming we get the money, and we believe we are, because basically they're allocating it by city, and we get $73,000. We just need to come up with a program that meets the goals of the grant. So we'll be working with them to make that happen, and this is one of the things we're going to put in there.
Do we have any kind of timeline? I don't mean to press, but are we talking?
We just received they just released the application last week, and so we'll be working on it over the next week or so. And I don't remember when the deadline is. I have to look at it again.
Then my last question is pretty high level and broad, and I think a few of my colleagues have spoken to it already, but just the concern about how we move from having a document that identifies more places to build to actually getting that done. And is there something we need to do the next time council comes together to talk about goals? Or what are the next steps once you have your housing element to make sure that we actually take action? I know there's implementation steps in here, but there's a lot of talk, and I think we got a lot of feedback from the community about let's not let this just stay at the kind of document level. Let's actually get something done sooner than later.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We are actually parallel, right? We have the housing element in front of you for adoption today. We actually already had you authorize us to submit applications for grants to do implementation that's in the draft document. You can't move a lot faster than that. And so we're going down that road to do implementation items to develop policies to help with housing. We're also trying to get the general plan, local coastal program, and zoning code adopted. Our zoning code is old, outdated, hard to use, and there's no cross-referencing inside of it, so there's a lot of gotchas in there. Getting a new modern zoning code that's updated will facilitate housing development, just in that it's easy to use. People can pick it up, look at it, know what the requirements are, put it down, go develop a plan. Right now, they can't do that unless they can't do that unless they talk to a planner. So we're running on many fronts to facilitate that. We're going to continue to do that, and we're looking at other ways to improve those. But that's what we have 3 different grant things that we're looking at to do implementation on the housing element. I mean, we're doing it before the housing element's actually adopted. So I'm not sure if you could move much faster than that, but that's pretty quick.
Thank you for that. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Davis, sir, questions?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say I really appreciate adding the Morro Bay vision statement to the introduction. I think that helps a lot to explain where we want to go. We heard today from many of our larger employers in the city, and they have very valid concerns about affordable housing for their employees. That's a big deal, and we need to take it very seriously. So with that in mind, I would like to ask Scott about some of our specific potential building sites here in the city and what we can do to make them go. Scott already talked about the Chevron property on Main Street next to Del Mar Park. We're basically being held by Chevron's inaction at this point. The properties surrounding Casa de Flores near the water reclamation site, There's 65 units there. And what do you think, Scott, is the real potential market for that? It's bare land, a lot of slopes and so on.
It does have a lot of slopes on it, but I think it's developable. It has slopes not, inconsistent with the ones that the adjacent subdivision that doesn't have houses on it, has. So you look at that property, there's 10 lots there. You could see that it's developable. We actually have somebody looking at that subdivision to take it from a 10 unit to a 40 unit development. So, I think the potential's there. There's also the opportunity to look at upzoning the property to allow for higher densities, and so they could concentrate them a little more in certain areas on the site that are more amenable to development and flatter, and so less expensive to build on.
Okay. In the plan, in the housing element, there is a 75 unit parcel at Little Morrow Creek Road, and that's right, I believe that's right off Radcliffe there above the bike park. Is that slope stable enough to support construction?
I believe so. You see they changed out the towers for the lines that go into the switch yard there, PG&E, and they came in and were able to put those towers back in, replacement ones and so forth, and prepare pads for those, and those all worked fine. They didn't have issues from a geologic standpoint related to that.
Are the overhead power lines any impediment?
They would be. You'd have to locate houses outside of the general power line corridor right there, yeah. But there's still land available on the site to do that.
Okay. The Panorama Street tank site, 45 units. The tanks have been removed. The property is zoned. What's the timeline for development of that?
So right now we are teeing that back up to take it back to we're closing out the first initial permit they have for the tank demo, and we are going back for a modification to that for some sheds that they removed without permits. Once they gain approvals for that, then they would be able to come back in with development permits to develop the site. It's unclear at this point whether the owner is going to do that or whether once they get clearance that they would just sell it off to someone else. A little unclear. He hasn't indicated one way or the other. He's said both over time. So,
okay. And then nearby, Chevron has talked about annexing 5 lots on Panorama, and I'm not sure how we are moving forward with that. I know there is an ordinance that requires a general vote to annex non-public use property. So how real do you think it is that would be annexed into the city and we could build on it?
Those lots are actually part of as part of the larger conservation effort out there. They involve the Cayuga Sanitary District and the city with the Dog Beach lots, the Cayuga Sanitary District with their property that sits over there next to Toro Creek Road. And there's an MOU in place, where, those lots get dispersed to the different entities, meaning city gets Dog Beach lots, CSD gets their lift station lots taken out of city limits, and then there's the 5 Panorama lots would enter the city's sphere of influence, and then Chevron would be responsible for going forward, through the process, through a voter, process to have them actually annexed into the city. They're aware of that process. We'll be placing limitations on that through the SOI process that we send off to LAFCO, whereby we place development limitations on those first one single-family house, and that one single-family house in each of those lots will be located towards the bottom of those lots, meaning adjacent to the other homes that are there on Panorama, preserving the backdrop of the city into the future.
Okay.
They're looking at 5 houses, if it were to go.
Not a big impact, and certainly not affordable housing. There are some sites that are not listed in the housing element that I'd like to ask about. And one of those is the Morro Bay Elementary property next to the community center. school district has expressed some interest in developing that. Do you know how serious they are, what the timeline is for that?
I think they're fairly serious. They've talked to us several times about it. Their consultant that was developing the options out there spoke with us. They looked at keeping some commercial out there, doing some for sale housing, keeping some apartments for themselves, building mobile home park out there, to generate continuing revenue on that side of things. They presented it to their board a little while ago. I don't know where they came down on any of those things. Certainly, they do have some intent to do something there. I mean, they do need to sort of backfill funding that they're going to be losing once Diablo shuts down and that type of thing. And they utilize it right now to fund various. They rent out portions of it on a commercial basis, for lease revenue that they're able to use to maintain their schools and stuff in the district. But it's not something we put in the inventory because it was a bit ephemeral at the time we were going through that process of identifying sites. It seems to be solidifying a bit, but again, I think we mentioned before that it's good to have sites in reserve because we did our best to indicate how we think lots will develop, but that's a crystal ball. Developers are going to kind of, in the market will kind of dictate what comes forward, and we're going to need reserve sites like that to utilize to make up the difference if things don't play out exactly as we have it identified in the housing element.
So by not being part of today's housing element, does that present any impediments to its development during the next 8 years?
I don't think so. I can't think of any. Amy? Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, I mean, no. Yeah.
It's just then a piece of property that would be subject to the policies that we are implementing with this housing element today.
Yeah.
Right. And we talked about this with the Planning Commission, and one idea was to have a list of sites at the city that could be accessed by people who are interested in certain types of projects that could include more sites than are in the housing element, especially once Glamorrow Bay gets approved.
Okay. The Tri-WP property north of Highway 1 between Morro Bay Boulevard and the Harbor Tract. The bulk of that property is protected from development by passage of Measure H. So is there any possibility of future development on that?
Well, a portion of it's zoned commercial, so a portion of it could be developed as commercial uses. Like the remainder of it's ag and or open space. So in order for somebody to unwind it, they would have to go through another voter initiative to unwind it, which I suppose somebody could go through that process. They'd have to sell it to the citizens of Morro Bay. It's a good idea to, and they have to show them what the development would look like and go from there, I suppose.
Okay. And I want to be clear, I'm not advocating that we do that. I'm just asking about it. And then the last piece of property is the Bank of America lot. I think they've moved the ATM, so it's possible they may put that on the market. And the land use, the zoning potential of that, how much housing could we put in there?
So I think under the current zoning, you have C1, which is sort of a general commercial classification along the front, and you have R4, which is a higher density residential, hotel, motel, and professional office designation that also allows for, again, housing on the backside of it. Under current zoning, it's probably under 20 units, maybe maxed at 20. Under proposed zoning, in the draft zoning code, goes to CC, again, more of a general commercial, central commercial designation on the front. And then the back half is a transitional mixed use land use. Both of those have mixed use capabilities, and we pegged the residential density at our maximum or high density number, which is 27 units per acre. So there's the potential to probably have 20 or so housing units on there, with whatever commercial would develop out of that as well, given that the front portion of it, street facing, should be probably commercial.
And aren't we looking at allowing 3 stories to be built on that in that area?
Yeah, so on the front half of that property, where the CC zoning is, that area along Morro Bay Boulevard is proposed, at least in the draft zoning code, to go to 37 feet, which would be 3 stories.
So we can do retail, professional, residential.
Yeah, be a mix, and would facilitate it better if you can get to that height, assuming it gains that height when it goes through the process.
All right, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Davis. With that, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing and open up public comment for item B on the agenda. Anthony, do we have anybody in the queue?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have Kristen Headland, and I'm going to bring her on right now. You're live, Kristen.
Good evening.
Welcome, Kristen.
Let's see. My name is Kristen Headland. I live in North Morro Bay. Thank you, Mayor, council members, staff, for allowing me to speak on this important subject. I live on Yerba Buena Street, and I understand that we have the 2 10-acre parcels that could be developed, and that would put 250 plus homes on North Main Street, with traffic being my main concern and the change of character of my neighborhood. We have Del Mar School that has traffic coming and going in the morning and in the afternoon. I understand that housing is very important here in Morro Bay. I've got adult children that can't really afford to live here because of the price of rents. And so for me, I like to remain active because I am concerned. North Main Street also is commercial, residential, and we have the possibility of there being 3-story homes. Is that correct? 3-story units with commercial downstairs, residential upstairs. I just see that there's going to be a big traffic issue for us that live here in North Morro Bay, and I'm wondering if there would be a traffic impact study done, and would that change anything as far as the possible development going in? That's all I have for this evening, and thank you very much for all your time and attention on this matter, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we have Betty Winholtz coming up. You're live, Betty.
Thank you. This is Betty Winholtz. Maybe half a dozen comments. Hi. First of all, I too want to say I appreciate there being a goal statement and change in introduction to the document. I thought that added to the document. I'm going to try to go through these by page number in numerical order. On page 134, I don't understand what 1.3 means, so maybe that could be interpreted. And on page 136, and from thereafter, it talks about one of the things that we can do to, quote, enhance projects is to adjust our height limits. And I would just be remiss if I didn't say that not only I, but other people believe that we need to leave the height limits as is, 30 feet downtown and 25 in our residential areas. That's for 1.1.3. On page 137, item 1.15, 1.19 on page 139, and in other places it uses that term. No, it's something that has now been instituted by the state that R3 and R4 housing has to meet that kind of density. You can't make it less, and that's something I've been asking about for a long time, so it's not an issue anymore, but I wanted to raise that as to bring it to your attention that you now know that. Wherever we use the term affordable, I think that either needs to be defined in the little glossary, or we need to not use it because there is no good definition. It causes confusion. And so by affordable, are you talking about very low, extremely low, low? Are you talking about also moderate? So if you want to use that, please define what that means to you in this document. Table H12 continues to have percentages that don't add up, and I would hope a lot of other little changes have occurred that were of import, but I think this table needs to be fixed as well. You have percentages that don't add up to 100%. This is something I don't understand, but I know it was explained at Planning Commission meeting, and that is defining the mobile home parks, those that are permanent and quote not permanent as not permanent people. And I think all those different kinds of units that are used by people to live in full-time should be considered as residents of those parks. And I want to just end by saying I do not believe in that by right item. I think I would like to know if a by right item can be appealed. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Anthony, next public comment.
Yes, Mayor Heading. I have John Weiss bringing him up now. Okay, Mr. Weiss, you're live.
All right. Good evening. I hope
welcome,
you can
John.
hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, very good. And it's quite a fascinating dialogue that's taking place, and I read the comments about the acute interest in housing, so I do support moving forward with the plan. I do think that one of the issues that I particularly was interested in was H17 on page 211. No, make that H16 on 211. ADU, tiny homes, micro homes, and I looked up Paso Robles, and they have tiny homes that average $60,583, and they have quite a few of them. They also have a development, and of course, they have more real estate than we do. So they have a 1,200 unit project in place with 350 for working force. But I really think that where we have an opportunity, because we do have, I believe, 396 vacant sites in town. I don't know what appropriateness it would be to have a tiny home on there or more than one, but if we're trying to find something that's affordable for our workforce, I mean, I have between my wife and I, we have 5 adult children, and only one is able to afford a house, and so it's definitely a concern. And of course, I think that it's important that we seriously address and take action on making affordable housing available. I mentioned before some other ideas relating to city property, but I won't repeat myself on that. But I would hope that you adopt the policy and look specifically at H1.6, as I mentioned earlier. And I also wanted to mention real quickly, since I have a little bit of time, I did speak to somebody who built a house, and they had no corrections on their architectural plan, and it took 6.5 months for them to have their plans approved, and it cost them $53,000. So they did find a couple of the people in the planning department were very helpful, but that just seems like an awfully long time if we have no sense of urgency, I guess is what I'm saying. I would hope that we can figure out a way. I looked at the number of pages on the fee schedules for permitting. It's 45 pages. There's got to be a way of streamlining it, making it more user-friendly, more customer service oriented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Anthony, next public comment.
Mayor Heading, I do not have any other callers on the queue currently.
Thank you, Anthony. With that, I will close public comment and close the public hearing, and I will bring it back to council for discussion. Perhaps I could frame possibly where we could go in terms of entertaining a motion, having listened to all council members, especially those that indicated they may have what I'll call non-substantive changes to the document that they would like incorporated. First and foremost, this is time sensitive, and that isn't a reason to absolutely move something forward, but we are under time constraints in order to move this forward as a document. Personally, I'd like to thank all of the staff members involved with this, including Nancy and then Amy, our consultant, and of course, Mr. Graham, for the work that you've done. A tremendous amount of information collected, a great document in format and form. But I think what we're hearing in somewhat from a number of folks is the lack of specificity and accountability for the plan. So before I move forward and frame this, let me just ask Mr. Graham or any of the staff members, let me go back real quickly regarding Ms. Headland's comment about the potential for building homes, 250 homes off of Yerba Buena. Would there be a traffic impact study if that were to happen?
So the densities are identified in the city's general plan, and there is the circulation element identifies traffic impacts for build out. So it's picked up in that document, and then any subsequent project that would come forward would also be required to do a traffic study.
Okay, and then Ms. Winholtz, page 134, section 1.3. She had a question about that.
I don't have it open in front of me right this second. I don't know if Amy's looking at it or not. I got to bring it up.
Yeah, I tried to find what she was talking about, and I didn't see it yet, but I thought she said that it said 1.3, so if she means section 1.3, I'll have to look.
I just wrote it exactly. I haven't looked it up, but then she also had a concern about height limitations on 136, and has raised that concern before. She made a comment about affordable, how to define that. I don't know if you have any feedback on specifically affordable and how that's interpreted. Maybe Amy, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, when it's used in this document, it's intended to mean for those who can afford 80% or less of the median income. So I'd be happy to define that if that's what the council would like to have happen. That would be a change that would be just fine from my perspective. And then I am not sure what comment on page 134, what the comment is on page 134. Implementation action H113 is on that page, but I think her comment was something like it doesn't make sense. And so I don't know exactly what she was referring to. But if somebody else heard more of it, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Oops. Need to change my earphones. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Amy, can you hear me? Yes? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can. Thank you. With regard, sorry, I just lost my earphones, so I had to make a quick change. Then she also had a question regarding table H12. The percentages don't add up. Has that been corrected, or is that something that needs to be corrected?
Yeah, we got that comment from somebody else as well, and we see 2% that need to be changed in that table. So we can make that edit.
Okay, so you'll fix that. And then mobile home parks, question about living in them full time should be counted as residents. I'm not sure I understood the comment, but.
Yeah, so I think it's the same comment she submitted during the Planning Commission review, which is, if I'm remembering correctly, it's that RVs, so mobile homes not on a permanent foundation, they cannot be counted towards the RENA numbers. So if there were new mobile homes installed, they would have to be on a foundation. So certainly, I think the community and the city consider those to be permanent residences and to provide a home for a lot of people. But unfortunately, from the state's perspective, they can't be counted towards that 391 number.
Okay. And let's see. She had a comment about by right. Did you catch that?
I think
I didn't know if that was referring to the grant work plan or something else.
I think it's just the concept of, doing, moving forward with, by right development. I think, having, heard many comments from Ms. Winholtz, I think she's very much into the process and likes the public hearing process, the ability for the public to weigh in on it. And I think she views this as, kind of the opposite of that. And so I am not surprised about the comments.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to make sure we covered those questions that were directed. And then now bringing it back to council, let me just ask in terms of this, I do have a proposed motion that I'd be prepared to make, but I'd like to hear a little more of the detail from Councilmember McPherson. You didn't articulate the changes that you thought you would want to make. Could you do that now so that we might determine if they're substantive or not, or would impact moving this forward?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. First, I also noticed the errors in that table, so that was me. And I noticed a couple of other places where the interpretation was inaccurate. And there was some inconsistencies in the data used, and I just thought that all of those things should be corrected. So that's a pretty minor thing, and I can certainly point out where they are. The second issue involved the homeless issues, which I thought the text should be revised to reflect what's actually going on in our city. It fails to mention a couple of important things that we are doing as a city regarding the homeless, which is, first of all, we support the Community Resource Connections Office, which provides resources to the homeless. And we have regular Monday night dinners at the Vets Hall that are serviced by volunteer organizations, and we've served over 23,000 meals. So they mentioned the food bank, but not what we're actually doing here. And I think it's important to be cognizant of those things. And then also, we have been working for some time now to get a homeless shelter here in Morro Bay, and we actually are in negotiations with the county level HSOC board, that the Housing Services Oversight Council, that has money available. And I would simply like to make sure that somehow that is noted in there. And we also were talking about a safe parking program. I just don't want us to be duplicating these things. I want to make sure that this draft recognizes and that we collaborate and work together to get these things done. So those are two of the important things. And then let me think of what. I think those were my main 2 points that I wanted incorporated.
Okay, let me ask either Amy or Scott, or Chris, do those seem substantive changes that if we just had that added language, we could move forward with this without coming back again?
Generally, yes. I would probably ask Councilwoman McPherson about the data issues. I think there's one place where you asked us a question about the housing unit and households numbers, and those are from a packet that HCD asks us to use, and I don't believe any of them are incorrect. So if you want to talk a little bit more about if you're seeing actual errors there, that would be my only question.
Yeah, no, I didn't see errors there. I think I mentioned them in my comments. There was a section where the data interpretation was incorrect. That is not involving the differences in the number of housing units and whatnot. No, I would like to just see some kind of an explanation for why they're different in all of the various tables, because the numbers keep keep changing. And even for the same year, one number is in one place, for example, average sales price of a house is listed in Morro Bay as $550,000 in one place and $750,000 in another. And I just simply want us to be more consistent, and where data in the tables come from different sources, it's fine to explain that, but it just needed to be said that because they come from different sources, they may not be consistent across all of the tables. So it's more of an explanation in that regard.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, I think if there's anything in our responses that we sent you that you wanted to talk about further, then that's where I would ask for more discussion. But I think if you're okay with the things that we said, yes, we can fix that or change that, then we would be fine with going ahead with that. But unless Scott wants us to go through each item during the meeting with the rest of the council.
I mean, I think we're okay. I think, this just deals with providing, information related to the data that's in there. I think expanding, having a little bit of an expanded description that, these come from different data sources, hence the differences in some of the numbers that are in there. And I think that's fine. I think, obviously the fixes that are changes that she proposed to fix some of the, the errors, I think those are fine as well. I don't really have any concern as long as Councilmember McPherson is good with the responses that we provided. I think we're good.
Great. Okay. Were there others, Marlis?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Davis, I think my motion incorporates your issues. When I make it, you can listen. I think I've got that. And then Councilmember Addis, I do believe I got the essence of where you were going. With regard to your questioning. And again, I refer back to the need for possibly more specificity in the plan and accountability. So with that, I will go ahead and make a motion, and then we'll open it up for discussion. I would move that the council adopt resolution number 79-20, accepting the Planning Commission recommendation to adopt the negative declaration and adopt the 2020-2028 housing element update. Number 2, I move that council authorize and direct the city manager to convene a community stakeholder group led by the Community Development Director and members chosen by the City Manager and the Community Development Director for the purpose of articulating and developing a written plan with specific details and timelines for city use concerning the implementation actions of the 2020-2028 housing element. Third, I would also include a recommendation that we incorporate the changes as articulated by Councilmember McPherson that are non-substantive to be submitted to staff.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mayor Heading, seconded by Councilmember Davis. And let's go ahead and open it up for any discussion.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, can I talk for a minute?
Absolutely.
So I have a few specific comments that won't take long to go through, which I would like to have folded into your motion about comments from the council.
Please.
In looking at this, to me, what I hear from the community, and I've heard for many years, as we all have, is affordability for our workforce. So I've spent a lot of time looking at policy H1.1, which is the live, work, and Morro Bay policy. And I want to talk about a few of the implementation actions that I'd like to have incorporated into the minutes and the actions that we take tonight. The first one is H1.1.4. And this particular implementation.
Jeff, could you give us the page on the staff report that's on? That'd be helpful to just get there, yeah.
Well. I printed this out. It's on, I don't have a page number.
So is it a table H1? What?
It's implementation action under policy H11.
Page 3-136.
I don't have those numbers.
I believe
I just have the action number.
Page 136 of the staff report. Staff.
Page 3-136 of the housing element of the staff report. It's page 213.
Thank you. Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks for that. So this is H1.1.4. And the action is that the city will encourage the development of new high-density housing in and adjacent to the downtown commercial district, which I fully support. I think if density is related to affordability, we need to look at increasing the density on our major cores. The only issue I have with it is the timeline, which suggests conducting the inventory by July of 2023 and to revise the zoning ordinance, if directed, by December 2023. I would like to move that date to the inventory being conducted by July 2021 and the zoning ordinance revised by December 2021. That's my
let me take them one at a time. I just asked staff, would that be considered substantive in terms of having to go back through the process if we added this?
No, I think this was due to kind of city staff resources was why these dates were in here.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is H1.1.5.
Can we get a page from staff on that?
Sorry about the page number thing.
It's the following page.
What page is that, just for the public's?
It's 3-137 or page 214 of the staff report.
Thank you.
So this one is, the way it's worded is, consider enforcing minimum residential density requirements to R3, R4, and MCR zones. And I think it was mentioned that state law is not flexible on that, but I could be wrong. But I would like that changed to will enforce minimum residential density requirements. In other words, we have an R3 property. We don't want a single family dwelling built on it. We want 3 units. So
it has been changed.
So the Planning Commission recommended that change. So that is
change been made because I'm reading it as consider enforcing the minimum residential density.
In their comments, that had been changed.
Okay, so that's been picked up. Okay, great.
Yeah. Good catch, though. Good.
Well, this is what happens when you read it 5 times.
I know.
H1.1.9.
H1.1. Staff, what looks like page 216, is that it?
216.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Okay, 119. The key thing on this, I wanted to, this has to do with density also. And it says conduct review and update zoning by December 31st, 2022. I would like to get our zoning updated in this city by the end of June 2021. The zoning issue to me is key to all of this, and whether it's Plan Morro Bay or however we do it, the zoning is really linked to affordability and density, and I think we need to expedite that and move that forward. So I just asked that the date to accomplish that would be July 2021 instead of December.
You said June 1st. Did you mean July? I'm taking notes as you go here.
Oh, that's a mistake. You shouldn't be. No.
Well, you mean 6/30, 2021.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Great. those are the items that I would like amended. I don't think any of them are substantial. The main in terms of approval or delaying the submittal to HCD. I just think that the zoning. I mean, we started the general plan update in 2016. Here we are, almost 6 years later, and we're still talking about zoning issues. And maybe I don't understand the process, but affordable housing is urgent, and a lot of it's related to density. The density is tied to zoning. Let's get this nailed down. So,
absolutely. Staff, do you see substantive issues with anything raised there and/or time issues? Go ahead.
Certainly, the timing. We're trying to get the general plan, local coastal program, and zoning code all done. So that'll be happening probably for adoption after the beginning of the year, based on the need for the EIR to go through the process. And so I would say first quarter of 2021 is when it'll be going probably through council at that point. So that's a lot of work. That's a lot of big documents, and so why we had the times pushed out a little bit, was because of that, realizing that that's the focus. We need to go do this. We can't be doing 15 other things at one time. That's why the timing was like that on the other items. Specifically, let me bring my notes back up here. Sorry. There it is. The H1.1.4, that would have us starting at the beginning of the year, 2021, and done by. Again, right in the middle when we're actually doing the hearing the general plan, local coastal program, and zoning code.
So from a resource standpoint, I just want to be clear, Scott, you're concerned about multiple initiatives going on and potentially not being able to meet these advanced timelines because of resource constraints.
Yes. I don't like that. I mean, I'm just concerned about creating unrealistic expectations, I guess, is where I'm at.
Okay.
I certainly happy to move it forward. Even a year would be okay. But that quickly might be problematic given where we're at with other things.
Councilmember Heller, any comment given the concerns of staff?
I certainly understand that, Scott Graham. We've had good success, I think, with work groups in the recent time period addressing a number of issues. Maybe some of this could be handed off to them. I think the products that have come out of many of the work groups that have been involved with city government recently have been really positive. There's some way to do that. I just think it's urgent, and I do get the sense that it's just kind of dragging on, and this is we do have limited resources, and I get that, but let's use some of the volunteers and the people in the community who are interested about it in these different things and put them to work and move the dates up. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, thank you. And then any other council member would like to weigh in on Councilmember Heller's recommendations and staff's response?
I would. We are having a goal-setting process that's going to be starting in January, and it's going to set goals and priorities for the next 2 years. And it seems to me that this is an issue that really should be addressed there, because this is when we take into account the priorities among all of the goals and the action items that are necessary to accomplish those goals. And I think that's when the decision is going to be made as to what the staff's priorities are. So I don't know that we should in this document be establishing that. I think my preference would be to leave the dates as is, but let that goal setting process be the time when we make some of these action items more important and move them up in the process. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McPherson. Any other council members like to comment?
I just would like to concur with that. That's one of the reasons I was asking earlier, what can be our next steps once this document is approved? How do we actually get action items going, and how does the goals process play into that? And I appreciate Councilmember McPherson's comments about using our goals process to to give a little bit more meat to our attention to housing. I was very appreciative that we put housing into our major city goals last time. And I think when it comes around again, it's time to get more specific and meatier with what we do. But I wouldn't want to change the dates in this. Given the level of work and the multiple competing things that are happening right now, I'd like to get this approved and then move forward to next steps.
Okay. Councilmember Davis, any comments?
Yes, I agree with Council Members McPherson and Addis about the timing and about using goal setting to establish a more concrete timetable. And I agree with Council Member Heller that this is a high priority item and it requires action. And I would like to add a recommendation to the mayor's motion about establishing a committee, and that is to include Melissa James as a consultant, maybe not a committee member. I reached out to REACH yesterday, and I've been wanting to say that all day. REACH is our Regional Economic Action Coalition. Melissa James is the executive director, and their key point for increasing employment in this region is providing workforce housing. Ms. James assured me that as soon as Morro Bay adopts its housing element, that she will promote our city as a place for developers to look to build new housing. I think she'd be a very valuable addition to our committee that moves that forward. I also, regarding the goal setting next year, I'm concerned about a part of our housing strategy that's not part of the housing element, unfortunately, and that's the mobile home parks. I'm hearing from park residents that the current ordinance needs to be updated. I think our staff doesn't have capacity to work on that right now.
So maybe a future agenda item, we're getting a little off topic on that, if that's okay. If you want to consider that. Yes.
That is just ducky, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me try to summarize. It appears that we have support to move the adoption of resolution number 7920 forward as stated in the original motion, that there's support for the second recommendation, which is to move that council authorize and direct the city manager to convene a community stakeholder group led by the community development director and members chosen by the city manager and community development director for the purpose of articulating and developing a written plan with specific details and timelines for city use concerning the implementation actions of the 2020-2028 housing element, and that the city manager consider reaching out to REACH for representation. And that there was support, thirdly, for the incorporation of the language as articulated by Council Member McPherson, which I believe staff caught and was non-substantive in terms of changing the document. That would be the motion as it stands, made by Mayor Heading, and I believe with that friendly amendment, would that be a second, Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Any further comments?
I just have one, and
yes,
excuse me, it doesn't need to be part of the motion per se, but just that I hope on this ad hoc group, and I'm sure that the community development director will do this already, but I just want to say out loud that I hope we can get diverse representation from our community on that committee. I know there are folks, we had a lot of comments back about seniors and the importance of focusing on different age groups in our community and making sure that what we're doing really fits for who we are and who we'd like to be.
Thank you for that. And just so that you know, I did speak to Mr. Graham prior to the meeting to try to determine if indeed there was capacity to do this. And he indicated that there was, and that this would be an important piece for accountability for the future. So with that, I will ask for a roll call vote.
Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Addis.
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
And Councilmember McPherson.
Yes.
So that is unanimous. That takes us to our next agenda item. Do we need a break, Council, or do you want to continue?
We need
We're good?
Is 8:30 our cutoff or 9:30?
9:30. Do you need a biofluid break, or do you want to continue?
No, I'm good.
I'm good. Thank you all. I'm going to sign off. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Appreciate that. Thank you, staff, Nancy and Scott, so much. All right, that brings us to item C1. This is adoption of urgency ordinance number 636 and introduction of regular ordinance number 638 to amend section 8.20.030 of the Morro Bay Municipal Code to increase penalties for unauthorized RV and vehicle camping and introduction of same ordinance. And I will turn it over to our esteemed attorney, Mr. Niermeyer.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. This item is being brought to the Council at Council's request recently. The fiscal impact of this item should not be significant at all. In fact, it probably should save the city some money. Essentially, fines are being proposed to be increased for illegal RV camping. Citations are already being issued for that activity, so there shouldn't be more enforcement activity. But the drain on city resources from unlawful RV camping presumably will decrease if we have stronger enforcement. In regards to the background, since the COVID-19 pandemic, the city is seeing a surge in RV camping in the city that is occurring in illegal areas of the city where it's not authorized. In fact, the Morro Bay PD reports that on an average weekend shift, there's over 50 contacts with illegal RV parking occurring around the city that's not in designated areas. And the impact of this across the board from staff has been negative. There's been, of course, problems of unlawful disposal of trash, human waste, fuel spills. It's a visual blight on the community. A lot of the community members have expressed concerns about this. There's also the fact that staff's reporting there's an environmental impact with damage to roadways, parking areas, wildlife, city property, and all that cost of dealing with that damage is borne by City of Morro Bay taxpayers. For purposes of illustration of the problem the city is experiencing with illegal RV camping, Commander Amy Watkins from the Morro Bay Police Department has some photos she'd like to share with the council that have been taken. So I will briefly turn over the report to the commander.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Niemeyer. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council and community members. I've been asked to provide just a brief photo slide to assist staff in this item. So as I share my screen, hold on one second. I apologize. Let me get back.
No worries, Amy. Take your time.
Oh. Let me try this one more time. So, here we go. Are we up? Can you see that that screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, as we go through it, and my first slide here, and what I wanted to represent. So these photos were taken over a series of approximately 3 of our recent weekends. Some of these are going to be in some daylight. Some of these are going to be obviously at night. But really, as you can see on my first screen here, what I have is I have kind of a depiction with the stars on the Google map that shows where our real area of concern is. Obviously, this is where we see most of our illegal campers, and we also receive most of our complaints from citizens. Obviously, this exists throughout the city, and officers address those, but for the purposes of this meeting, I wanted to keep it brief. So these are going to be some of the areas that you'll see these photographs as we go through them. So this is obviously over near our Triangle lot on the north end of Embarcadero, behind the Maritime Museum. You can see the overall size of this recreational vehicle. These photos were courtesy of Harbor Patrol, so this is obviously early morning, so these individuals have been parked alongside overnight as the morning arrives. We continue with additional, these are obviously in front of the power plant. This is usually a large contingency of campers that we find. I'll just scroll through here. Here's another one here that's obviously just an overnight camper. As we head out to the Rock, this is a common view of what we see early morning hours, certainly during the weekend hours, but it does not exclude weekdays as well. These individuals have obviously been set up and camping overnight. And I can tell you that in my recent patrolling, I went out a couple evenings on a Saturday evening and to experience this with our supervisors and officers, and just to really get a feel for what the officers are dealing with on a regular basis. Again, you see the size and overall occupancy of this particular RV here at the Rock. As we get into the evening hours, this is really more of what the officers deal with certainly on a weekend, Friday, Saturday nights, and then on the weekday. This is coming around, excuse me, in Atascadero, just on the pit parking lot side. You can actually kind of see the pedestrian bridge there. But these are, you can see on this photograph, there's some camping chairs and somebody's got their awning out. Here's another one. In this one, you've got, these are large scale recreational vehicles. And this again is on the Atascadero Road coming around in front of Morro Bay Dunes RV Park. You can see the officers there out making contact with these vehicles. Again, here's another 3 along the Atascadero Road. And then we moved back to the Rock. So this was just about 2 weekends ago. This was actually a photograph that I took. You can see where these vehicles, and this is at the Rock, these vehicles have actually created kind of an enclosure for themselves to create some privacy. And as we go through here, I'll show you some of the trash that's accumulated. Here's another one at the base of the Rock. You can see my arrow there, and that's showing some feces, I'm assuming from an animal, and some of the other, bicycles and things like that can create opportunities for theft, which the officers would ultimately be called to. This particular photograph here, I'm looking at the outside shower. I'm assuming that this is a showering, but also right below that shower, you'll see the outlet for a dump station. So I don't know what type of liquid that is, but we, like Mr. Neumeier said, we have received numerous reports of people dumping black water or gray water after they've camped at the Rock. And I wanted to show you a few photos. There is a diaper that's been left at the base of the Rock by campers. Here's some of the trash that you'll see on a regular basis. And then what I'd like to try to do is show you, I took a video, we'll see if this works. I'd like to see if maybe I can if it doesn't work, I'll abort the mission here, but let's see. believe it's this one. It doesn't look like I have it. I apologize. So anyway, so that's ultimately what I have as far as photographs. I mean, those are just a few, but that's the general idea of what we face on a weekend night basis. So I'll turn it back to Mr. Niemeyer.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Commander. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I think that those pictures help illustrate the problem the city's been facing. So that's the background. The legal solution, council requested that fines be increased for the citations. And right now, the Morro Bay Municipal Code, Chapter 8.24, does prohibit illegal camping, whether it's by RVs, it's sleeping in a car, sleeping on public property, or on beaches. However, it is expressly punishable as an infraction, and infractions are limited by state law in general to a maximum penalty of $100. Currently, the administrative citation program that's being used in lieu of the infractions has it set at $62. So if we kept this behavior as being criminalized only as an infraction, we'd be capped out at $100. If we change it to a misdemeanor, then we don't have the same limitations. And furthermore, that misdemeanor, just like the infraction, can be cited as an administrative citation under Chapter 1.03 of the Morro Bay Municipal Code. So this amendment changes the penalty from an infraction to a misdemeanor for illegal camping. It only includes illegal camping with vehicles. To be clear, we're not going to increase the penalties for folks that are sleeping on the beach or on public property without a vehicle. And also the administrative citation program that the city currently has in Chapter 1.03, it provides for a 24-hour warning before actually the citation can be levied. And so this amendment takes out the 24-hour warning for administrative citations issued under this code amendment. The reality is right now, from what staff's relayed to me, is that if a citation is issued, there has to be a 24-hour warning, and it's only $62. And given that paying $62 for effectively staying for 48 hours is often cheaper than going to a designated RV lot, it seems that a lot of folks are just deciding to pay the $62. And it's not even anything other than administrative citation. What the proposed amendment would do would allow immediate citation, and there would be a penalty scale of first citation is $250. Second citation within a year of the first one is going to be $500, and third citation is $1,000. If the council would like to, they can change the scale of those fines. Those just are a proposed scale, $250, $500, $1,000. And to be clear, this is going to apply to vehicular camping. I'm not proposing, nor does this amendment have the intent of increasing penalties for folks that are sleeping on public property or the beaches and aren't also using a vehicle. And this ordinance, I'd like to thank Commander Watkins and Chief Cox for working with me on this, and also the Harbor Director, Eric Endersby. We pulled this all together, and I'm available for any questions. This is also presented as an urgency ordinance and a regular ordinance. An urgency ordinance becomes effective immediately if there's the proper findings that there's a threat to the public health and safety, which I believe has been demonstrated. A regular ordinance, of course, you need to have 2 readings, and then it's effective 30 days after the second reading. So you're looking at usually 45 days. It's suggested that the council both pass the urgency ordinance, so it's effective immediately, and we have a basis for that, and also do a first reading on the exact same ordinance. So if there's any issues with the basis for the urgency, within 45 days, it'll still be on the books as a regular ordinance. I'm available for any questions, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Commander Watkins, for those poignant examples of the issue. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for council questions. Councilmember Addis, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Davis, questions?
I don't have any questions. I couldn't be happier with the severity of this ordinance. I've adopted Centennial Parkway. I've been picking up trash there for 6 years, and I'm tired of it.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Heller, any questions, sir?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commander Watkins, for your time on this, and Chris as well. Just to clarify, sleeping in a car, now is that not part of this infraction because you're not camping, or was it? I'm not sure I understood that differential.
So the ordinance itself is amending the current code, which basically prohibits sleeping in cars, vehicular camping, and then just sleeping on the ground. What it does is it increases the penalty for sleeping in a car between 10 and 6, and also vehicular camping.
Okay, both.
We can certainly change it so we don't include just sleeping in a car. As to whether that creates enforcement issues, I would defer to Commander Watkins on that.
Yes, so I tell you that obviously the pictures that I've shown you are the large recreational vehicles, but half of our population in these locations are people sleeping in vehicles. And these are people who will come over for the weekend, either not find a location that they're willing to pay for a hotel, so they decide that they're just going to sleep in their vehicles. These are not people who are transient or homeless. They're people who have come over and either choose to not pay for a hotel and or they enjoy sleeping out at the Rock with all that entails, the waves and the bay and the sounds and that it brings out there. So about half of the contacts that we make specifically out at the Rock, a large half of that contingency is people sleeping in their vehicles. So I would recommend that we maintain that part of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Very helpful. Now, when you say it's an administrative action, I think is what you said, Chris, does that mean it's tied to their vehicle, or how is that fine collected?
So it's issued to the person, and as a matter of backup, the state of California, of course, allows cities to make criminal behavior punishable as an infraction or a misdemeanor. The state of California also allows cities to, instead of issuing an infraction or a misdemeanor citation, to issue what's called an administrative citation. And so the intent is to just have less paperwork and to just issue a citation on the spot. And it's essentially a civil fine. And that civil fine would be issued to the individual.
And what's the collectability of a civil fine issued in that way?
Well, if the citation's issued, they're supposed to pay their fine in X amount of days. And if they don't, then it can go to a court and a bench warrant could be issued. In regards to what the city's posture will be if the original citation isn't paid, that's a question for enforcement and for city staff. I do think that if someone didn't pay the original citation and just never did the activity again, then the goal's been accomplished. But the ability for the fine to be increased for repeat offenders, I think definitely would provide a deterrent effect.
Okay. And then signage, I was talking with Scott Collins about this earlier in the week or recently about, I'm always intimidated by a sign when it says, don't do this, and then the dollar amount is on there. So are we going to be putting up a lot of signage that will have a dollar amount on it so that people know that if they do this, it's going to cost them X number of dollars?
Yes, sir. We've added 13 new signs in hotspot locations, and obviously we don't want to presume council would support action tonight, so we would be able to add those modifications after if it's approved at this level. So that would sort of be the smaller sign. It would say $250 fine below the bigger sign.
Okay, it'd be like minimum $250 fine.
Yeah, some along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the only other thought I have is whether that's steep enough, or whether it should start at $500. But I'll just leave that for other people to chime in on if they. Otherwise, I like this very much. And Commander, thank you so much for that. Pictures do say 1,000 words. I've seen those things, and I'm so glad that you brought that to the table. And Chris, thank you for your work on this as well. That's all I have.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
And just to be clear, the city certainly could increase the first citation of $250. Reasonably, it could go up to $1,000. There's an attorney general opinion that said it was okay for a city to start out the fine at $1,000 for illegal fireworks. So I'd be comfortable with it going up to $1,000, but that would be entirely at the discretion of the city council.
Thank you, Chris. Councilmember McPherson, any questions?
Yes, I had the very same questions that Councilmember Heller had. I was concerned that we were possibly using this as a way to deal with the homeless issue, and I would hope that that's not the case. The only other question that has not been answered of mine is what will the police do if someone offers to move? Will you just let them, or keep track of that, or?
So yes, I mean our position, I think in history and certainly at this particular moment is we always provide the opportunity for people to move, and I think that this ordinance in particular is not going to affect those people who simply say, hey, we didn't see the sign, or we're moving along. It's really to address, and I'll tell you from my experience over the last weekend, it's to address those individuals who come to the city with no intention of establishing a rental, or a temporary property in a designated camping area. And when we approach them, they say, we'll take the warning and we'll take our chances. So we have to give them a warning. If we see them the next evening, then it's a $62 fine. And I'll tell you that when we were out there just a couple weekends ago, one of the groups that had been kind of developed a little compound out at the Rock, they had been contacted on the Friday evening, were given the warning and told that they couldn't camp. That was on the Atascadero Road, and then they ended up at the Rock on Saturday night. And we informed them that we would be issuing them a $62 fine. They said, no problem, we're not going to go anywhere, then we'll just take the fine. So what we're hoping with this ordinance is to be able to address those individuals a little bit better with the $250 fine, so that on that first warning, if warranted, we will advise them that if they do not move, a $250 fine will be given to them. And I have a feeling that far exceeds or at least doubles the amount that they could have paid at a rental property. So I think that will make the impact that we're looking for. And I'll tell you that I think the word has gotten out that Morro Bay fines are much less than our other county cities and communities. And so people have chosen to come here and perform this activity with the understanding that they'll just accept the $62.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And all my questions have been answered. So with that, I will go ahead and open up public comment for item C-1. Any member of the public wishing to comment on item C1, please do so now. And Anthony, any people in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, I do not see anyone in the queue currently.
Okay, just give it a sec here.
At least I do not see any hands raised currently.
Okay, with that, I will close public comment, bring it back to council, and entertain a motion.
I will move that we adopt urgency ordinance number 636 and introduce regular ordinance number 638 to amend section 8.20.030 of the Morro Bay Municipal Code to increase penalties for unauthorized RV and vehicle camping.
I'll second that.
And if I could interject, just to clarify for the record.
Sorry.
I assume that it's by title only with further reading waived for both those ordinances.
Oh, okay.
Do you amend that, accept that amendment? Okay, and seconded by Councilmember Davis.
Yes, I accept the amendment.
Good. Any discussion?
Yes, sir. May I chime in here?
You certainly may, sir.
Go ahead.
You go and then I'll go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So in looking at those pictures, I mean, not everyone has one of these, but a lot of those RVs, motorhomes, you know, they're $250,000, $300,000. I don't think $250 is enough of a deterrent. Frankly, I think we should start at $500 or $1,000. These people can afford to pay $250 and stay put. So I think if we're going to enact it, let's put some real teeth in it and get people's attention. So my recommendation would be a minimum 500 and maybe even 1,000.
Okay, Councilmember Addis.
I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmember Davis, who sounds like he's been picking up trash since before it was cool to pick up trash and since before he was elected to council. And he's so humble that he would never say anything about that. But I wanted to call that out and say thank you for doing that and sticking with it.
Thank you for that. I do support the motion. I do have the same sense as Councilmember Heller that potentially it could be steeper, but I would feel comfortable with the motion as it stands, and then maybe just getting a report from the city website, the city manager with regard to how it's going. So with that, I'll also thank staff. Thank you, Chris, for this report. Amy, Commander Watson, thank you so much for poignantly revealing the issue. It's obvious we need to do something to protect our coastline, to protect our folks, and to not waste time with regard to our staff having to deal with these kinds of details. So I'll call the question, please. Roll call vote.
Councilmember McPherson.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for that. That ends that business item and brings us to item C-2, adoption of an interim urgency ordinance, number 637, approving a 45-day moratorium on the issuance of new short-term vacation rental permits. And I will turn it over to the Community Development Director and City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor Heading. I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation I'm going to bring up here. Assuming I can share my screen. There we go. Looks like we're gonna have to do it this way. It's not wanting to load up, but anyway, it's fine. So as was stated, the item before you is an urgency ordinance to implement a 45-day moratorium on the issuance of short-term vacation rental permits. A little bit of background. This conversation started back in May 24th of 2016 when the City Council reviewed the existing policies related to vacation rental permits that are located in Chapter 5.47 of the Morro Bay Municipal Code. And at that time, the Council determined that the existing policies were inadequate to protect our local residential neighborhoods. Council provided direction at that time for the city to staff to bring back a moratorium on the issuance of vacation rental permits, and that moratorium would include a cap of 250. Second piece of the direction provided by council at that time was to incorporate the update of the vacation rental policy into the general plan, local coastal program, and zoning code update, taking special care to look at parking location, overall number, and distance requirements between rentals. Following the direction by council, staff returned on June 14th with urgency ordinance 604, which implemented a 45-day moratorium on STR permits with that 250 cap. We then came back about a month later to extend that moratorium for 22 months and 15 days through the adoption by Council of Urgency Ordinance 605. During that time frame, we were going through the general plans and zoning code update process. We developed a draft ordinance, but at that time it became fairly clear that we weren't going to have it in place by the time the moratorium expired. So we brought forward Ordinance 613, which permanently put in place and incorporated into Chapter 5.47 the 250 cap on short-term rentals that you see in the code today. Fast forward to the end of 2019, the city continued to experience delays in the general plan and LCP and zoning code update process. And council directed staff to pull the STR ordinance out of that process and to form a committee, a vacation rental committee, to develop a new ordinance. Moving into early 2020, city manager formed that committee composed of Morro Bay residents, stakeholders, city business owners, and then the city council subcommittee on vacation rentals of Mayor Heading and Councilmember McPherson, who facilitated the committee meetings. I believe there was approximately a dozen of them. Recommendations came out of the STR committee and were forwarded on to the city attorney's office, who drafted an ordinance, which we have under current review by your planning commission, who first reviewed it last Tuesday, your TBIT board, who reviewed it last Thursday, and the planning commission will again review it next Tuesday, hopefully completing their review and forwarding recommendations on to city council. On August 11th, so that was your last or previous planning city council meeting, Councilmember McPherson, during future agenda items, raised the concern and made a suggestion about implementing an urgency ordinance to prohibit the issuance of new STR permits during the time that the draft ordinance is going through the approval process. The reason expressed by Councilmember McPherson for that request was concerned that the current vacation rental ordinance lacks sufficient public health, welfare, and safety measures. And in looking at what the draft language in the ordinance says, it's pretty clear that if we continue to kind of keep that number at 250, it's going to be a much more difficult road once we implement the new ordinance to weed out non-compliant vacation rentals. So those were the two sort of reasons given, and I think all council members supported bringing this item back. I will note that typically, the moratorium process that's identified in California Government Code Section 65858 only allows you to extend moratoriums up for 2 years. You just can't keep going and extending them further and further. So we have a second one coming before you that is related to short-term rentals, but we believe different. And so the city council does have the ability to adopt a second interim ordinance related to short-term rentals, assuming the circumstances differ from the previous urgency ordinance that was adopted. We believe that's the case. The city attorney's office has done the analysis as well, and certainly Chris can speak to that, assuming you have questions for him later. But the previous interim ordinance that was adopted in 2016, again, capped the number at 250, and that was actually, then implemented into the regular municipal code. The proposed urgency ordinance looks to prohibit the issuance of short-term rentals permits until study and adoption of the ordinance takes place. And then we anticipate that the ordinance would include buffers and density requirements and other policies that are meant to protect that local health, safety, and welfare of our community, which was the concern noted in bringing the item forward. Sort of the nuts and bolts of how this works is, again, Government Code Section 65858 allows council by 4/5 vote to implement an urgency ordinance implementing a 45-day moratorium on the issuance of new vacation rental permits based on the protection of public safety, health, and welfare. And there are findings in the ordinance to that effect. There are several of them, actually. And then 10 days prior to that 45-day expiration, we are required to bring an item back, a written report that would be adopted by council that describes the measures that were taken to alleviate the condition that led to the adoption of the ordinance. That'll be pretty simple. We have a draft ordinance. That draft ordinance has been under review by your advisory bodies and will soon be coming to council, so that shouldn't be too much of a hurdle for us to get over, and that'll be coming back to council on September 8th. And then in order to extend that 45-day moratorium for an additional period of time, again, through a 4/5 vote, we would bring it back and you'd be able to extend it for 10 months and 15 days, the next round up to an additional 1 year after that, if need be. And we would be bringing that extension back to council at the following city council meeting on September 22nd. Again, the city's current short-term rental ordinance does not include adequate health, life, and safety measures to protect the public, especially as it relates to buffers and density limitations and other health, life, safety measures that are in there. And that's particularly poignant in considering the impacts that we're having from COVID-19, in that we have increased, visitors coming into the city. I think with everybody staying home, or at least staying relatively local, you see a sort of mass migration on folks on vacation or just getting out of the house, going either up to the mountains or down to the ocean. Particularly here in Morro Bay. And so we do see an issue with that. And so the recommendation of the staff report and staff is to adopt interim urgency ordinance 637, implementing a 45-day moratorium on the issuance of short-term vacation rental permits. That ends my presentation, and I'm available to answer questions, as is City Attorney Chris Newmeyer. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Chris, both. Appreciate the comprehensive overview, and you certainly have well articulated the issue. With that, I'll open it up for council member questions, starting with council member Davis, sir. Any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I appreciate the work that staff has done on this.
Thank you. Council member Heller.
No question. Thanks again, Scott, for putting this together quickly. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member McPherson, any questions?
I do have a couple. I just wanted to verify, and I have asked our city attorney this question already, but I want to make sure that as written, this would also include a moratorium on the transfer of an existing short-term vacation rental permit upon the sale of a house to a new owner. It talks about the issuance of new permits, but I'm talking about the transfer of a permit with the sale of a house.
Yes, that is the intent of the interim moratorium. Insofar as the problem that's being articulated is that, in part, the city wants to make sure that we minimize the legal nonconforming uses. So not allowing transferred permits to be allowed addresses that issue. But more to the point, Section 5B of the moratorium, it provides that no permits, licenses, approvals, or entitlements may be issued or applications accepted. My understanding from staff is that when there is an attempt to transfer an existing permit to a new owner, an application needs to be filled out, and there's a short window of time to do that. And so since no applications are being accepted, then absolutely this interim moratorium would also apply to transfers of current permits.
Okay, great. I wanted to make sure that was in there because that's happening quite frequently these days. Then the second extension, which is up to 10 months and 15 days, can that be rescinded as soon as the new short-term vacation rental ordinance takes effect? And hopefully that's less than 10 months and 15 days.
Yes, it can.
All right, thank you. Those are my questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Addis, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, and I have no questions either. So with that, I will go ahead and open up public comment for agenda item C-2. Any members of the public wishing to give public comment, please do so now. And Anthony, do we have any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have a caller, phone number ending 327, bringing them live right now.
Thank you.
You are live.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, welcome, Dan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciated Councilperson McPherson's questions in regards to if the moratorium included a moratorium on the selling of homes that had permits and whether those translated across or would be accepted for an additional permit. And I appreciate the answers by staff and our city attorney. I fully support the moratorium. I listened to the Planning Commission's meeting, and the city manager's elaborate presentation there, and then the items for discussion were very thoughtful and deliberate, and in looking at our city's safety and other needs in regards to the short-term vacation rentals. I think it's time to take pause with the issuance of permits, and I fully support this moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anthony, other public comment?
Mr. Mayor, I do not see any other hands raised currently.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close public comment, bring it back to council. Personally, I will tell you that I am very supportive of this urgency ordinance. I do believe with the lack of an existing buffer with regard to short-term vacation rental permits, that in the midst of a pandemic, it presents significant public health issues with regard to proximity and the number of people. So with that, I will go ahead and move the staff recommendation to adopt interim urgency ordinance number 637 by number and title with further reading waived, entitled An Interim Urgency Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay, California, approving a citywide 45-day moratorium on the issuance of any new permit, license, approval, or entitlement pertaining to a short-term vacation rental within the City of Morro Bay and declaring the urgency thereof.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember, by Mayor Heading, and second by Councilmember McPherson, I believe. Any discussion?
It was a tie. I'll give it to Marlis.
I asked for it.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Councilmember.
Yes.
Councilmember Addis.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
And Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great. Again, thank you, Chris, very much for that. And thank you, Mr. Graham. We appreciate you bringing that forward and that presentation as well. That brings us to item D, council declaration of future agenda items. I believe Councilmember Davis had one articulated earlier with regard to mobile home park ordinance.
Yeah, it's not really a future agenda item. I just wanted to ask staff to keep it on the list of goals to discuss at goal setting session next year.
Great, got that. Any other future agenda items?
I have one, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to suggest.
Yes, Councilmember.
This workforce housing issue is a huge thing. It has been for a long time, and it's so difficult to provide affordable housing in California. It's a well-known problem. It affects the lives of many of us, either through our own ability to pay for housing or those of family members or friends. I And so much of it is out of our control. The landowners, to a certain extent, control whether and how a lot of things get developed, and that's driven by market conditions. And even when things are developed, market rate rents kick in. So even if we built 1,000 units here in the next year, it doesn't mean they would be affordable. So what I'd like to suggest is that under Scott Collins' guidance, that a citizens committee be formed to investigate the feasibility of building affordable housing on city-owned property. So that's my.
I'm still writing. Thank you, Jeff.
Sorry, it's so long-winded.
Yeah. Citizens Committee be formed to investigate the building of workforce housing on city property.
Exactly. That's fine.
Thank you. And that would have to be agendized, obviously. And so you're requesting that as a future agenda item.
As a future agenda item, yes, sir.
Okay. Is there support, other council members?
I thought we already did that with the committee that Scott is going to convene, and I would suggest that this be added to the mandate of that committee rather than have a specific agenda item. I think that's something that can easily be folded into that committee that Scott's offered.
You're talking about the housing element recommendation that we passed this evening for the formation of that committee. Okay.
I'd like to see what comes out of that committee, and if they can have, some kind of discussion. I don't know how detailed that committee is meant to get on this particular aspect of housing, but I'd like to see some broad strokes around this idea and what comes out of it, and what needed next steps there are. Rather than deciding now for a specific item or a specific topic of conversation, let that committee do the work that we've asked them to do already and wrap this into it, not as another layer, but as part of the overall conversation.
But thank you for that. The intent of my motion was to incorporate not only the other issues articulated, but the significant input from the business community with regard to shortage of workforce housing. And so my assumption was that would play a large part of that committee.
If I may, yes, good point raised by Councilmember Heller. We are in the process of getting appraisals on the city property that was discussed by City Council during the budget process for the adoption of this current year's budget. And so when we have more information to bring back to Council, it may be an opportunity to sort of discuss what those opportunities are for those properties, including affordable housing or other types of development. So it could be that time would be the opportunity to have that discussion. But the stakeholder group, we'll be looking at kind of housing comprehensively, albeit in a shorter time frame with the housing element, and we can sort of kind of bring this up as a topic of discussion.
Okay.
That works.
Does that work for you? Good.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other future agenda items? Hearing none. Brings us to E, adjournment. The next regular meeting of the City of Morro Bay City Council will be held on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. via teleconference. Thank you. Good evening. Be safe and be well.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.